Chapter 102. Jinwan had not fainted for too long. She was already feeling unwell, and there was no fresh air in the bathroom. The enclosed space made it difficult for her to breathe. She did not know how she had suddenly fainted. She struggled in the nightmare for a long time. The nightmares from her previous life that had not appeared for a long time were invading her consciousness, until her body suddenly felt as though it had been soaked in a pool of warm water. Her cold body gradually warmed up, and the uneasiness in the nightmare gradually faded. Below her neck, there seemed to be a strong hand holding the back of her neck. From time to time, her forehead would be covered by another hand, as though testing her temperature. So warm, so comfortable, was this also a dream? Abruptly, Jinwan opened her eyes. Her gaze seemed to have lost focus. After opening them for a long time, she slowly returned to herself. She turned her head slightly in a daze, looking at the man by the bathtub. The moment she saw Mo Jingshan's face so close to hers, her heart instantly jumped. She watched as the man's brows were tightly furrowed. His gaze was cold and stern, and his hand was still pressed against her forehead. She was startled. She saw that his suit was thrown on the ground not far from the bathroom. The buttons on his shirt were undone from time to time, and his sleeves were rolled up, revealing his wrists. However, because he had been using both hands to hold her in the bathtub to prevent her from choking, his sleeves were more or less soaked. However, he did not seem to mind. His gaze was heavy, causing her to tremble uncontrollably. For a moment, Jinwan could not wrap her head around it. Wasn't she locked in a bathroom? Didn't he not notice that she had come to this banquet? How could it be? She suddenly woke up, and she was right in front of him. Furthermore, he had taken off her clothes, and she was lying in the bathtub just like that. The bathroom door was tightly shut. Various footsteps could be heard from outside, and Shuyan's voice could be heard from outside. CEO Mo, the clothes I brought are new. Do you want Mrs. Mo to change first? Mo Jingshan appeared as though he did not hear the voices outside. His cold gaze landed on Jinwan's pale face. If you want to come to the banquet, why didn't you directly ask me? What's the meaning of this? Jinwan finally gradually returned to herself. The alcohol in her mind continued to wreak havoc, causing her to feel uneasy. Outside, and Shuyan was still gently knocking on the door. Jinwan was silent for a moment before smiling faintly. Her eyes were a little misty from intoxication. You can come together with Shuyan. Why can't I find someone else? She did not explain how she came here, nor did she want to explain. As soon as she finished speaking, she felt the man's hand on the back of her neck become full of thorns, and she began to struggle to sit up. Don't move. Mo Jingshan's voice was low and heavy. His gaze was clear and indifferent as he pressed down on her. Earlier on, the bathroom was damp and humid. Your body temperature is too low. Soak in the hot water for a while longer. I'm fine now. Maybe it was just some difficulty breathing before, but I'm much better now. Jinwan spoke unhurriedly and sat up in the bathtub. She raised her hand to push his hand away, but he held her wrist instead. She struggled again, but to no avail. She could only look up. I said I'm much better now. She raised her voice. She saw that the man's gaze was fixed on her, not allowing her to avoid him at all. Jinwan tried hard to calm herself down, but she was still slightly dizzy from the alcohol. I didn't come tonight on purpose. Furthermore, even if I wanted to come, I'm afraid there's no place for me by your side. The reason I didn't bring you to this dinner party was because I didn't want you to misunderstand. Mo Jingshan more or less softened his tone, but his hand still held onto her wrist without loosening. Oh, I really didn't misunderstand. Jinwan lowered her head, no longer looking at him. Mo Jingshan saw that she was sitting in the water. It seemed like she really did not plan to continue soaking. He casually pulled a towel over her head and helped her dry her dripping hair. Jinwan turned her head away to avoid his hand. She raised her hand to press down on the towel on her head. I'll do it myself. The man did not speak. His actions continued until he carried her out of the bathtub. At the same time, he pulled over another towel that was larger and wider enough to wrap around her body. He wrapped it around her and carried her out of the bathroom. Jinwan did not speak the entire time. Only when she was placed on the bed did she instinctively curl up her legs and hide in the bed, invisibly maintaining a distance from him. It could be seen that even though she did not argue, her emotions were already filled with negative emotions. Mo Jingshun pulled the blanket over her, forcing her to lie under it. He then pressed his hand against her forehead and looked at her, speaking solemnly and softly. Qin's sighting will be here soon. I've already asked someone to buy a new set of clothes for you. Lie here and rest first. Jinwan could tell from this suite that this should be the guest room on the upper floor of King's Court Hotel. There were still hundreds of guests in the banquet hall on the first floor. Tonight was an important dinner party between MO Corporation and Shine Group. Since she was fine right now, he should take some time to deal with the aftermath. She did not speak and close her eyes. She did not even want to make a sound. She did not even want to hear a single word of his advice. Wan. The man stood by the bed. His clear and deep voice called out her name. Jinwan appeared as though she did not hear him. She closed her eyes and did not speak. She did not move, but her hand gripped onto the towel wrapped around her body. Her grip gradually tightened. How much wine did you drink earlier? Mo Jingshun stared at her. Earlier, when he carried her into the room, he could smell the scent of several different wines mixed on her body. Although the alcohol content of the wine prepared for the dinner party was not high, the fact that Jinwan's alcohol tolerance was very low was known by the entire upper class of Haicheng. She would definitely get drunk after drinking a few glasses. He had seen this a long time ago without her knowing. Furthermore, today, there were several types of wine mixed together. Seeing that she was still using the excuse of being drunk to throw a tantrum, Mo Jingshun placed her handbag on the bedside table. He picked up the phone that had run out of battery and glanced at it. After confirming that it was indeed out of battery, he placed it down. Be good and rest in the room. Wait for me to come back. After speaking, the man glanced at her again. Seeing that she was currently half drunk and could not cause any trouble, he directly left the room. Outside the room, and Shuyan saw that he had finally come out and rushed forward. "COMO, how is Mrs. M.O.? Is she all right?" However, Mo Jingshun's expression was cold. He did not pay her any attention and walked down the stairs. Half an hour later, the banquet hall seemed to have returned to normal. Mo Jingshun walked through the crowd. His expression was still calm and impeccable. However, his gaze did not move toward Shuyan. Even when Shuyan walked over to seek his gaze, the look she received made her tremble as though she was sitting on pins and needles. Qin's sighting had already arrived. He suddenly approached Mo Jingshun's side and softly mocked. "This old man drove 180 miles per hour to rush over, but your woman is not in the room at all." Mo Jingshun's gaze hardened. His silent and cold gaze subconsciously scanned the entire banquet hall. He suddenly laughed coldly. Chapter 103. In the room, the towel was tossed onto the bed. Jinwan's cell phone and other items remained untouched on the bedside table. The room service staff explained by the side. "Earlier on, I only brought the clothes I bought for Mrs. M.O. and then went to clean the other rooms. I didn't notice the commotion here." Qin's sighting crossed his arms and leaned against the door. He snorted. "Since you still have the ability to slip away, I think your woman should be fine. Based on her physical condition, aside from her fear of the cold, she doesn't have any other problems. She's very healthy." As he spoke, Qin's sighting raised his chin, using his gaze to point toward the window. "Isn't that right? She still has the strength to jump out of the window." Mo Jingshun had long noticed the open window and the fluttering curtains. His expression did not reveal the slightest hint of anger. His gaze was indifferent, as though he did not have any emotions. Qin's sighting appeared eager to watch the show. He walked to the window and casually glanced outside, chuckling softly. No wonder she didn't take the usual route today. There's a very tall tree outside the window. A child can jump down without getting hurt. In a bar half a city away from King's Court Hotel, Jinwan sat in a secluded corner. The wine glasses on the table were arranged in a row. She had drunk 2 glasses. It was not bad. She raised her hand to rub her nose, expressionlessly reaching for another glass. This was a leisure bar, a type of bar. Most of the customers were refined people who listened to music and drank. It was not as messy as ordinary bars. Not far away, There was only a young man hugging a guitar and singing a sad ballad. The more he sang, the sadder he became. The more he sang, the lower his voice became. Jinwan, who had been trying hard to calm down, was stirred up bit by bit. She couldn't help clenching the wine glass tighter and tighter. She had run out of the hotel to calm herself down. Otherwise, she was afraid that she would not be able to control her emotions. She really wanted to grab Mo Jingshan's collar and interrogate him. In her previous life after their divorce, did he spend every day with Shuyan when he went to America? That 10 years of his life that she could not even touch. He was the powerful Shine Group's global CEO. Everything about him was impossible for her to know. The distance between them was so far, so far. And in those 10 years, who was it that walked so closely with him? Was it Shuyan? Was it Jimin Gran? Or was it a woman thousands of times better than her? But she could not ask. If she did, she would only be treated as a lunatic who spoke nonsense that others could not understand. Shine Group's CEO, Mo Jingshan, has returned to the country today. He has already arrived in Haicheng. What are you looking at? Do you know who that person in the news is? A woman like you probably doesn't even have the qualifications to carry his shoes. The last few words she heard before she died in her previous life suddenly rang in her ears. GG. G Group's GG. Suddenly, she felt like she was in an ice-cold prison. Everything around her was icy cold. That kind of helpless struggle and the feeling of suffocation from the poison were all surrounding her. It was so cold that her teeth were chattering. Not far away, there were two men who were listening to music and drinking. They were dressed like elite white-collar workers of the upper class. They noticed the sound of a bottle falling to the ground in the corner. The two men looked back and saw a slender and fair woman hugging her knees and curling up on the sofa. Her face was buried in her knees, and her body was trembling imperceptibly, as if she was very cold. "Miss, are you all right?" The two men walked over, asking in concern. Jinwan clenched her fists. She raised her eyes. The moment they saw her face, the two men were stunned. After a long while, they said in surprise, "Miss G?" Although Jinwan had drunk, she could recognize them. They seemed to have worked with the G family's company. It didn't matter who they were. She couldn't be bothered to think about it. She only glanced at them coldly before burying her face in her knees again. The two men saw that she seemed to have drunk too much. She was quiet and depressed. She did not look like the arrogant and domineering Mississippi. The two of them asked worriedly, "Miss G, did you drink too much? Do you need to contact someone from the G family to pick you up?" In the end, the two of them had yet to finish speaking when Jinwan suddenly raised her head. She asked expressionlessly, "Do you want a drink?" The two of them. To be able to sit and drink with the G family's miss. It was truly a blessing of 3 lifetimes. All right? Who would refuse? Even if it was just drinking, this was definitely a huge temptation to men. Furthermore, they could take the opportunity to curry favor with the G family. Only a fool would refuse. Half an hour later, Jinwan's eyes were no longer red. Her sad mood was also gone. She began to speak in all sorts of smiles. She clinked glasses with the two of them, and as she drank, she raised her hand and pointed at the people singing in the stands not far away. "Let me tell you, I've turned over a new leaf. If it was in the past, if I saw such a handsome and good singer in a bar, I would definitely go and tease him. Also," she smiled and narrowed her eyes. She raised her finger and pointed in a circle. "Do you know who the boss behind this bar is?" Let me tell you." As Jinwan spoke, she raised her finger and placed it by her lips. Her eyes were hazy as she giggled. "The boss here is, I'm sorry, she can't drink anymore." The wine that was about to reach Jinwan's lips was suddenly intercepted by a hand. Mo Jingshan's expression was as heavy as water. He pulled Jinwan, who was sitting paralyzed on the sofa and giggling foolishly, into his arms. He did not look at the two people's awkward and bewildered expressions as they realized who he was. He half dragged, half carried her up. He even kicked the coffee table in the middle of the sofa away and directly brought Jinwan away. Jinwan, whose brain had been completely washed by alcohol, was completely unaware of what had happened. She even waved at the passing waiter, vainly trying to get another glass of wine to drink. "I still want a drink. You're already this drunk after just a few glasses. Do you think you'll ever have the chance to touch this in this lifetime?" Mo Jingshan's expression was heavy as he brought her out of the bar. His hand forcefully wiped Jin Wan's face, wiping away the wine stains on her lips. As he wiped, Jin Wan dodged, refusing to cooperate at all. "Be more obedient." His tone was low and filled with anger. At this moment, a white luxury car that had been quietly parked on the opposite side of the road started its engine and drove away. Mo Jingshan watched as the car left. His gaze instantly turned bone-chilling. He then glanced at Jin Wan, who was disobediently trying to struggle out of his hands. Chapter 104. She remembered that she was brought out by Shang Yihan. She also remembered that she wanted to find a place to calm down. When she got out of the car nearby, she warned Shang Yihan not to follow her. However, she did not expect him to find her so quickly. "Do you want to get in the car yourself? Or do you want me to carry you in?" Mo Jingshan's cold voice carried a hint of sternness. However, he did not let go of her, in case she ran away like a rabbit. There were cars passing by nearby. If they were not careful, they would be in danger. Jin Wan stood in the same spot without moving. Right now, not only did she not want to get in the car, she also wanted to take off her shoes and throw them at his face. Seeing that she was standing there like a statue, Mo Jingshan's hand directly wrapped around her waist. Jin Wan's gaze turned to him, pausing on the well-tailored and well-made long coat he was wearing. He only had a shirt inside. There was no suit. Oh, that's right. Previously, he gave her the suit to wear. It seemed to have been thrown in the bathroom. It was worth a lot. Just the price of that suit alone was enough to buy a 200-square-meter house in the capital 10 years later. Right now, the coat he was wearing was even more expensive. She looked at the man's cold and handsome face and suddenly smiled. In the past 10 years that seemed like a dream, and in the recent days that they spent together, she had never thought about what kind of man she had married. How high was he that even Jin Wan was not worthy of him? How good was he to make her go from a firm goal in the beginning to a stage where she was gradually afraid of losing him? Jin Wan stared at him, using a voice slightly hoarse from the alcohol to ask, "Is the banquet over?" "Not yet." Since she asked, he answered, but his tone was slightly heavy. Jin Wan's heart ached. She lowered her head. "Then go back. I just want to come out to calm down. I don't want to hold you up." "Calm down? You jumped out the window and ran so far to drink just to calm down?" Mo Jingshan's hand around her waist was almost pressing her into his body. It was slightly heavy, and it hurt slightly. Jin Wan furrowed her brows and pushed him. "We are on the street. There are cars passing by. Be careful. Go back to the banquet. I'll take a taxi back to AO Lan International." As she spoke, she suddenly used force to push the man away. Jin Wan turned around and really reached out to hail a taxi. "Stop." The man's deep and cold voice rang out. Jin Wan acted as though she could not hear him. She ignored him, her hand still reaching forward. It was only when a taxi approached and was about to stop in front of her that her waist and wrist suddenly tightened. The world spun around her as Mo Jingshan pushed her into the car he had driven over by the roadside. It wasn't the business car he had taken to the King's Court Hotel tonight, but the black ghost that she was very familiar with. Her back bumped hard against the car door. Although it was not painful, Jin Wan instinctively put on a defensive look. Before she could speak, Mo Jingshan bent down and kissed her on the lips. There was only a faint taste of champagne in his mouth. It was mellow and pleasant, and his unique, cool aura caused Jin Wan's mind to feel as though a string that had been stretched taut suddenly snapped. She suddenly raised her hand to push him away, but he pressed both her arms against the car door. It was a very forceful press. His wrist was almost broken by him. She had never seen Mo Jingshan with such a temper. Jin Wan hadn't thought it through before. At this moment, she roughly understood why Mo Jingshan had never been affected by Jimeng Ran's indirect attacks. It was probably because he had known many things about her and her past since a long time ago. So, was it because of Shang Yihan? She had yet to do anything with him because of Nshuyan. Why did he have to have a temper? She did not know when this kiss would end. The cold wind blew past. Jinwon was trapped between his chest and the car. Because of him, she could not feel the cold air. Finally, her legs began to weaken. Mo Jingshin placed a hand on her waist, supporting her weak body that was about to slip. Jinwon's drunkenness had yet to dissipate. She was kissed until her vision was blurry, and she could not speak. She could only hear the man's clear voice by her ear. I haven't even settled the debt with you, and you've already given me a good show of jumping out of the window. Jinwon, you've grown up. Jinwon abruptly raised her head. The car door was abruptly opened, and her entire body was pushed inside. Her body fell onto the seat without any resistance. She scrambled to sit up, but he had already walked around the car and sat in the driver's seat. He locked the door and did not give her a chance to alight. Mo Jingshun, can't anyone throw a temper? I came out to drink because I was in a bad mood. It's not like I fought or threw a tantrum. What right do you have to treat me so harshly? Jinwon turned around and shouted at him. Her breathing was hurried, and her chest was heaving. She glared at him. Mo Jingshin was neither cold nor warm. You should be thankful that the one drinking with you earlier wasn't that illegitimate son of the Sheng family. Otherwise, I'll let you know what it means to truly go overboard. He directly drove the car away. However, not long after, Jinwon felt a wave of nausea from drinking too much tonight. She raised her hand to her mouth as though she was about to vomit. Mo Jingshin stopped the car and finally unlocked the car. Jinwon rushed to push open the door and staggered out of the car. She squatted by the side of the road and retched. She had not eaten anything tonight. Apart from alcohol, there was nothing else she could vomit. Her throat was burning. Her heart was uncomfortable, and her entire body was uncomfortable. Sensing the man's approach, Jinwon squatted by the side of the road and said weakly, If I take the car again tonight, I'll definitely vomit again. My stomach isn't feeling well. Go back to the banquet first. Don't worry about me. Before she could finish her words, the man abruptly lifted her up by the waist. The moment Jinwon's feet and body left the ground, her two hands instinctively grabbed his collar. Her half-drunk, half-awake eyes met Mo Jingshin's that were as deep as the sea. How can I not care about you? The man's voice was low and indifferent. There was a hint of helplessness in his tone toward her current state. When Mo Jingshin forcefully brought her into the nearest hotel, Jinwon was unable to resist, both physically and mentally. On one hand, she really did not want to take the car again. Her stomach was filled with alcohol, and her stomach was churning with the urge to vomit. On the other hand, when she came out, she did not bring her bag, money, or cell phone. If she was really left here, she would most likely only be able to sleep by the roadside. Even if she was drunk, she could still understand the logic of being under someone else's roof. Furthermore, under Mo Jingshin's diamond and gold-rimmed roof, there was no way she would court death. Chapter 105. Jinwon abruptly took a step back. Her expression was solemn, as though saying, I want to keep my distance from you. Her entire body was like a porcupine as she attempted to retreat further. Mo Jingshin glanced at her. Why don't you try taking another step back? Jinwon did not speak. She turned around and leaned against the wall of the elevator. If she was drunk, she would just drink. But now that she was drunk, she was like a punching bag. After exiting the elevator and entering the room, Jinwon directly slipped inside. She still insisted on keeping her distance from Mo Jingshin. Mo Jingshin raised his hand to press against his brows. He then looked at her expression. His black eyes stared at her as he unhurriedly unbuttoned his expensive and exquisite cufflinks. He softly and indifferently said, You're drunk. I won't bicker with you. Come here. Jinwon stood by the window warily. She leaned against the curtains, as though only then could she feel some sense of security. I'm not drunk. She raised her voice to defend herself. I told you to come here. Mo Jingshin's heavy voice cut her off. Jinwon leaned against the curtains, her hands gripping the fabric tightly. Her gaze landed on her toes as she softly emphasized, I said I'm not drunk, so I'm not drunk. Mo Jingshin, You can't rely on my good temper to stop me from finding a quiet place to stay. Besides, your temper is good? Mo Jingshan smiled imperceptibly. Jinwan, wasn't her current temper good enough? You're not drunk? He coldly smiled again. Jinwan, she did not care. In any case, she was not drunk. All right, since you're not drunk, let's have a good chat about tonight's matters. Mo Jingshan's low and cold voice approached. Jinwan watched as he approached and subconsciously leaned against the window behind her. If you take another step back, that window that isn't tightly closed will open. This is the 18th floor. Do you want to fall? He spat out each word without any warmth. Jinwan's heart skipped a beat. Earlier on, she felt a cold breeze on her back. She turned back to see that the window behind the curtains was indeed not tightly shut. There was still a gap, and a little wind was leaking in from it. She was silent for a moment before reaching behind to pull the window inward. As she closed it completely, she suddenly felt the man's cool scent approaching. Jinwan turned her face away, refusing to look at him. Seeing that she was clearly going to continue ignoring him, and Mo Jingshan's perfect jaw tightened. In the next second, he grabbed her wrist and pressed it against the bay window behind her. Jinwan sensed his pressure and abruptly looked up at him in shock. She took a step back and leaned against the glass behind her. However, just as she was about to struggle, the man's cell phone suddenly rang. The melodious ringtone rang one after another. She didn't need to guess to know that the banquet hadn't ended yet. Regardless of whether the call was from Shuyin or Mo Shaoza, it had nothing to do with her. Your phone is ringing, Jinwan reminded. Mo Jingshan appeared as though he did not hear anything and continued to stare at her. Being stared at by him, Jinwan felt goosebumps all over. Seeing his cell phone ring a few times, he stopped, and then continued to shout a few seconds later. She raised her hand to touch his coat, took out his cell phone, and saw a string of numbers that had not been saved in his address book. However, Jinwan also recognized that it was in Shuyin's number. That night, she had only seen it once, but she had remembered it with her woman's instincts. She looked at him with a hint of a smile and handed the cell phone to him. It's your secretary in, however, Mo Jingshan coldly pushed away the cell phone she had raised. When Jinwan glared at him, he directly snatched the cell phone from her hands and mercilessly threw it behind him. Pong! With a thud, the phone fell heavily on the slightly reflective golden tile floor, and the incessant ringing also came to an abrupt end. Mo Jingshan was the type of man who did not need to show any expression of anger. Just a mild and cold glance was enough to cause fear in people's hearts. Although Jinwan was not afraid, the instant the cell phone landed on the ground, her mind went blank for a moment. My secretary in? He chuckled coldly. Who gave her the right? Jinwan returned to her senses. She turned to look over his shoulder at the shattered cell phone on the ground. Although it was not the one she had bought with her, she could not help but take a few more glances. I'll say it one more time. His gaze landed on her face. Every word clearly entered her ears. Right now, you're not sober enough. There's no need for us to argue. We'll talk after you wake up tomorrow. Be obedient in? His gaze was clearly cold, and he clearly carried dissatisfaction. However, due to Jinwan's gaze, he still softened his voice to avoid scaring her. Previously, Jinwan had been stained with the smell of alcohol in that bar. The smell was not pleasant, so she went to take a shower. Because she did not want to face Mo Jingshan for now, she took a long time to shower before coming out. She wrapped the towel tightly around her body and put on a bathrobe. After ensuring that she was completely covered from head to toe, she walked out of the bathroom. She scanned the room, but did not see Mo Jingshan's figure. Did he return to the dinner party? Jinwan slowly pulled up the bathrobe on her body. She walked to the window and opened it. The thick bathrobe could barely withstand the chilly night wind. It was already very late. The corridors of this hotel were quiet, and there was no one walking back and forth. Outside the window, the night was quiet. Only the occasional headlight of a passing car would flash by. From the 18th floor, she could almost see half of Hai Cheng's bright lights. She finally sobered up a little. She also clearly confirmed that what she wanted now was indeed more than before. If it was a month ago when she had just woken up in the bridal room, She would not have cared about the words of those people today, including in Shuyan's existence. What she wanted was the identity of Mrs. M.O. What she wanted was to be able to protect everything she had lost and not repeat the same mistakes. What she wanted was to live a good life again. But earlier, she really minded it. She minded it to the point where even she was shocked. Tonight, she might really be a little emotional. When she came out, she did not even think twice and directly boarded Shang Yihan's car. Usually, even if a knife was held to her neck, she might not have done it. Jinwan rubbed her forehead, suddenly feeling a little regretful. She had really lived 2 lives in vain. As someone who had experienced almost everything, her mental fortitude was actually not strong enough. Chapter 106. The man stood by the door. Seeing that she was standing there unmoving, wrapped in a towel and bathrobe like a bloated snowman, his cold brows immediately furrowed. "Come here," he said mildly. His tone was indiscernible. Jinwan remained standing there unmoving. She had thought that he had returned to the banquet, but it turned out that he had gone to buy food for her. "You had an accident in the bathroom last night. Your entire body is cold and unconscious. Right now, you're standing by the window to enjoy the wind. Do you want to fall sick?" Mo Jingshan's voice was heavy. "Close the window and come here." Jinwan was indeed slightly cold. Earlier, she had only thought that the wind would clear her mind. Seeing that Mo Jingshan's gaze had grown colder, she raised her hand to close the window. Walking over, she lowered her eyes to look at the takeout in his hands. Just by smelling it, she could tell that it was her favorite dishes. She raised her eyes to see that Mo Jingshan was glancing at the bathrobe she was wearing. He did not seem as cold as before. "You didn't return to the banquet?" Jinwan cleared her throat, speaking unnaturally. "I thought." Mo Jingshan reached out to touch her face. Jinwan paused, raising her eyes to look at him. Her skin was ice cold. He did not speak, his cold brows furrowing. His warm palm rubbed her face until Jinwan's expression was no longer as stiff and her face was no longer as cold. Only then did he place the takeout in his other hand on the table by the side. "And Shuyan alone has already angered you to this extent. If I were to return now, I'm afraid that you would even dare to jump from the 18th floor." Mo Jingshan's tone was cold. "Jinwan, I'm not that desperate." Mo Jingshan glanced at her, raising her chin with his hand. His clear, cold eyes watched her. "You've sobered up?" "When I showered earlier, I sobered up quite a bit." Jinwan tried to turn her face away, but he still held her chin, preventing her from looking away. She raised her eyes to meet his. The man's gaze was slightly dark. He stared at her for a long time. "What happened to Shang Yihan?" Jinwan lifted her eyelids, her tone slightly unconcerned. "I have nothing to do with him. He has always been Xia Tian's doctor. When I visited Xia Tian at the hospital, it was inevitable that we would cross paths." Seeing that Mo Jingshan was only watching her coldly, she could not help but furrow her brows and continue to explain. "He is about to return to the Shang family. He invited me to attend the banquet. Originally, I did not know what kind of banquet it was and did not want to come. But in the end, I was brought here. I was afraid that there was something strange, so I did not enter. Then, I saw you and in Shuyan." As she spoke, Jinwan glanced at him. Even if she didn't speak, her meaning was clear. What she meant was that she did not dress up as anyone's female companion, nor did she want to have too much to do with Shang Yihan. Bye. From. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many things happening tonight. And. Eat first. He placed his hand down and opened the takeout on the table. The exquisite, translucent box contained Jinwan's favorite Chinese dishes and pastries. There was also a glass of hot fruit juice. Jinwan was originally angry, but now that she had sobered up, she could not throw a tantrum. She sat down, picked up her chopsticks, and took a bite. "How did you know I didn't eat?" she asked casually as she ate. Her eyes were fixed on the food in front of her and did not look at the man by her side. "Earlier, when you vomited outside, you could only vomit out wine. If I can't tell, how can I be your husband?" Mo Jingshan saw that she was still tactful. He saw that she knew not to make things difficult for her body and stomach. His tone softened and was no longer as cold. Jinwan's mouth was still full of food. She paused and suddenly used her chopsticks to poke at the rice. She mumbled, "So you still know whose husband you are?" And Mo Jingshan's brows moved. He rubbed her head as though comforting her and chuckled softly. Hearing that he was actually laughing, Jinwan forced herself to swallow the food in her mouth. She raised her head and glared at him. Mo Jingshan, even if I'm sober, it doesn't mean that my anger has dissipated. You can still laugh? So are you feeling wronged? He was still smiling, his finger already touching her angry brows. She was not wronged. She was angry. Mo Jingshan was the only legitimate successor of the Mo family. He was also the most favored successor. As long as he nodded his head, no one could stop him from obtaining everything. Furthermore, the Mo family's foundation had always been stable. There was no need for the in-family support. It was still a giant among the American Chinese businesses. Their position would not be shaken in the slightest, no matter how she thought about it. The relationship with the in-family was just a mutually beneficial one. Everything was just Mo Jingshan's father's one-sided wish. However, those people made it sound as though Mo Jingshan not marrying in Shuyan was his loss. Which woman would not be angry after hearing this? To prevent this little woman from being filled with anger, Mo Jingshan sat by her side and placed a cup of hot fruit juice in front of her. His voice was clear and heavy as he patiently explained, "Do you still remember my promise to let Secretarian return to America in a week?" Jinwan choked for a moment. She rushed to take the juice and drank a mouthful before barely managing to calm down. Mo Jingshan's hand gently rubbed her back. As he helped to calm her down, he softly said, "The collaboration between the Mo Corporation and Shine Group was originally supposed to be completed in 2 weeks. However, I forcefully limited it to a week. Recently, I've been working overtime in the office, attending meetings, and attending too many projects. This is also the reason." Jinwan was startled. "Because of me, you compressed the work that was supposed to be completed in 2 weeks into a week." Mo Jingshan smiled. "My father did indeed plan on keeping in Shuyan and High City. However, I have a rough understanding of the in-family and in Shuyan situation. Tonight was a trap set up for them. Every step was within the plan. The goal was to successfully send in Shuyan back to America and not form a grudge with the in-family because of this." Seeing that Jinwan's gaze was somewhat apologetic, he smiled mildly. After all, the Mo family and the in-family have been friends for many years. I can't let the two families' elders' faces become too ugly. That's why the scene you saw tonight happened. Jinwan finally realized that her jealousy tonight was a huge mistake. She awkwardly and apologetically said, "Tonight, I actually didn't see anything. What she saw was in Shuyan appearing together with Mo Jingshan as his female companion. Regardless of what the others said or did, Mo Jingshan and Shu Zhu did not act too intimately." Chapter 107. Jinwan pursed her lips. "Then why didn't you tell me beforehand?" Mo Jingshan glanced at her meaningfully, his hand lifting her chin. His brows were low and deep as he chuckled. "Before everything ends, I didn't want you to feel any psychological pressure." Jinwan's heart instantly melted like the first snow in the winter. If she had known that Mo Jingshan had been so busy these past few days only because he had promised to do all of this within a week, she would indeed feel some psychological pressure. She would also ask herself if she was being too unreasonable. "I'm sorry." Jinwan's biggest mistake was neglecting to trust him. She felt very apologetic in her heart. "Actually, regarding Secretarian's matter, I don't really mind. I know that you don't have any feelings for her. And you're very magnanimous." Mo Jingshan seemed to have seen through her thoughts. He said with interest, "Jumping out of the window, climbing a tree, and drinking to drown your sorrows, I'm afraid there isn't a woman more magnanimous than you in this world." Before Jinwan could feel ashamed, the man's hand had already hooked a strand of her slightly damp hair on her shoulder, asking softly, "Are you full?" Jinwan was really in the wrong today. She quietly nodded, allowing his hand to gently stroke her shoulder. His posture was leisurely and careless. His slender fingers casually curled up a strand of her hair. Now it's my turn to eat. Then you eat. I didn't eat much. Jinwan raised her hand to tidy up the lunchbox on the table. She took out a new set of cutlery and pushed it in front of him. However, the man chuckled softly. Without even glancing at the food on the table, he pressed her against the side of the table and slowly kissed down her neck. Jinwan's body was filled with the fragrance of shower gel. Her body was wrapped in a towel and bathrobe. It was so tight that he wished he could tear it apart. It was tempting to crush her into his stomach. Jinwan's entire body softened from his kiss. She almost drowned in his embrace. When Mo Jingshan's kiss landed on her lips, Jinwan was shocked to find that Mo Jingshan's kiss was becoming deeper and more seductive. He kissed the corner of her mouth, then her burning cheeks, and then bit her earlobe. His breath fell on her earlobe. I've been working overtime these days and haven't had enough sleep. How are you going to make it up to me? Jinwan leaned against his shoulder, feeling the heat of his body. As the sensitive spot by her ear was stimulated again and again, she softened in his arms. What do you want? She leaned on his shoulder, tilted her head slightly, and gazed at him with her watery eyes. If you're really tired, how about I give you a massage before going to bed? She thought it was a good idea, so she raised her hand and waved it in front of his eyes. Do you want a massage? The room was very quiet. The moonlight outside the window and the neon lights of the city were blocked by the curtains. Mo Jingshan held her raised hand, bringing it to his lips to kiss it. You're helping me bathe? He raised his eyebrows and chuckled. Jinwan nodded without hesitation. All right, wash your entire body, he emphasized. All right. Jinwan nodded again. The expression on her face could not be any more natural. It was rare for her to be so cooperative. Mo Jingshan's elegant brows moved. He smiled and stood up to head to the bathroom. Jinwan followed him in and turned on the bathroom lights. After thinking for a moment, she asked, At this time, the dinner party, don't you need to go? Mo Jingshan removed his coat, unhurriedly unbuttoning his shirt. 1 button, 2 buttons, 3 buttons. Everything that requires me to appear personally is more or less done. As for the follow-up of the project, Shun Mu and the vice president of the company will be there. Even if I stay there, I'll only be there to calm my father down. Mo Jingshan's tone was mild. But if you don't stay there, will Director Mo? Jinwan paused. She did not plan on mentioning the incident in the bathroom tonight. She and Mo Jingshan had a tacit understanding of the instigator of that incident. She was very clear that with Mo Jingshan around, aside from Mo Xiaoza, no one else would dare to give such an order. Mo Jingshan unbuttoned another button. His voice was much lower and colder. Initially, I did plan to leave him some face, but now there's no need. As soon as he finished speaking, the man turned around. Beneath his completely unbuttoned shirt was a chest that could make a woman's mouth go dry instantly. The lines of the man's body were perfect, and every part of him was indescribably seductive. These 2 words should not be used to describe a man, but it was not an exaggeration to use them on Mo Jingshan. Jinwan's gaze trembled from the visual impact. She recalled what she had promised earlier and took the initiative to help him remove his shirt. 2 minutes later, Mo Jingshan's light lips curved slightly. He watched the little woman whose hand had paused on his belt. Continue. Jinwan, when Mo Jingshan said to take a bath, he would really take a bath. Jinwan thought that she would be eaten up and wiped clean by him in the bathtub. In the end, when she began to scrub the great CEO Mo's body from top to bottom, he remained as still as a mountain. He only glanced at her meaningfully from time to time, but did not do anything. After working overtime for several days straight, he was most likely really tired. Jinwan did not want to waste any more of his rest time. She took the initiative to help him dry his body and was about to leave. However, Mo Jingshan suddenly held onto her waist and pulled her into his embrace. Following that, Jinwan heard his voice that had been suppressed for a long time. You still want to leave? Jinwan's arm pressed against his already dried chest. She glanced back. If I don't leave, what else can I do? It's already so late. Furthermore, you seem very tired. Without waiting for her to finish speaking, the man pressed her heavily into his embrace. His kiss landed on her neck, and he gently bit down on the skin on the back of her neck. It was no wonder the ancients would always reveal the neck when beheading someone. The back of a human's neck was naturally weak and sensitive. Jinwan felt as though he had bitten down on her nerve center. The sensitive signal immediately exploded in her consciousness and traveled down her body. Half of her body was already numb. Emo Jingshen tightened his grip. Originally, seeing that your body wasn't feeling too well today and that you suffered in the bathroom, I was considering letting you off. However, you even brought out the ability to jump out of the window. That's fine. According to what you're saying, your man only worked overtime for a few days, yet his strength to make love is affected? That's not what I meant. What I meant was, her sophistry had yet to leave her mouth when she was carried up by him. Mo Jingshin directly pressed her against the bathroom wall. Jinwan was squeezed between the wall and him. Both her legs were forced to wrap around his waist. She had helped him shower earlier, and the towel and bathrobe on her body were mostly wet. He reached out to undo the cumbersome things on her body. Since they were all wet and heavy, there was no need to wear them anymore. Chapter 108. However, no matter how she tried to hide or how she begged for mercy, Mo Jingshin did not plan on letting her off easily tonight. His body pressed tightly against hers. Remembering that Jinwan was wearing the gown Sheng Yihan had prepared for her today, he narrowed his eyes and abruptly flipped her around. Jinwan's back was facing him. Feeling his kiss land on the sensitive part of her neck again, she couldn't help but twist her body. The man behind her let out a muffled groan and began to deliberately bite the back of her neck. Sometimes it was light, sometimes it was heavy, but it was as if he wanted to kill her. Furthermore, at the moment when Jinwan was about to cry, he did not hesitate to barge in from behind. Jinwan directly cried out. As she trembled uncontrollably, he leaned down by her ear. "You and the Sheng family's man don't ever see each other again. See, no. He's also a doctor." Jinwan was so agitated that she could not complete her sentence. "What?" When Mo Jingshin heard her first word, his actions became harsher. Jinwan was bullied to the point where she could not think. She rushed to say, don't see never again. I never planned on having anything to do with him." Mo Jingshin no longer planned on letting her off. No matter how she tried to explain or act coquettishly, he did not let up. The curtains in the room were half opened. Light shone in from the back. The man's upper body was bare, and his figure was smooth. This was the scene that Jinwan saw when she opened her eyes. After a night of entanglement, she was tired and weak. She did not want to move at all. Even though the sun was already high in the sky, she did not bring her phone with her. Mo Jingshin's phone could no longer be used. It was rare for them to have such a quiet and undisturbed space. She did not want to ruin it. But last night, she felt that because of her jealousy and her minding, other than dissatisfaction, he seemed especially pleased with himself. At first, she did not notice it. Later on, when she was forcefully pressed onto the bed and her head was about to hit the headboard, she finally heard a hint of delight in his words. In the past, she always wanted a divorce. Later on, she suddenly changed. Step by step, they became successful. However, she remained calm and did not do anything extreme. Last night, he was extremely pleased, right? Because she was really jealous. Jinwan used her eyes to describe the handsome face of the man beside her when he was asleep. When he was asleep, Mo Jingshin's handsome, quiet, and aloof demeanor gave off a sense of approachability. Especially the coldness between his brows that could freeze one's heart and make one tremble at any time. Right now, it was completely gone. Like some kind of expensive and aloof feline, there was actually a little bit of softness in its sleep, making people want to get close to it. Jinwan gently turned over in his arms and looked at him from the front. Seeing that his eyes were still closed, she blinked and raised her hand to trace the man's elegant and deep profile. Mo Jingshin's handsome face was against the light coming in from the window. In the darkness of the light, it appeared warm and dark. Jean Wan's fingers carefully and gently caressed his handsome brows, then his closed eyes, and finally his high nose bridge. Her fingers gradually landed on his lips. On the man's pale lips, there was a small bite mark from last night. It was very small and could only be seen from such a close distance. This cannot be blamed on her. Who asked him to be so fierce last night? Even if she cried and begged for mercy, it would not work. She was so angry that she could only bite him. Not only did she bite him, but Jean Wan's gaze also shifted to his back. Last night, she had even scratched his back harshly several times. Have you seen enough? All of a sudden, the man's low and mild voice rang by her fingers. Jean Wan jumped in fright and abruptly retracted her fingers. Mo Jingshin only spoke hoarsely. Without opening his eyes, he reached out and pulled the similarly naked Jean Wan into his embrace. His arms tightened around her waist. What time is it now? He hugged her. His voice was slightly sleepy and hoarse. It was indolent and overly sexy. Jean Wan glanced out the window. I don't know. From the color of the sky, it should be past 6. His palm pressed against her back, gently patting it. You only ate so little last night. Are you hungry? Jean Wan wanted to say that she had expended so much energy last night. Right now, she was indeed awakened by hunger. However, being hugged by him like this, she would rather starve than get up. No, I'm still sleepy. She buried her head in his embrace, speaking softly and coquettishly. The man's light chuckle came from above her head. It was very light. His hand caressed the back of her head, then continued sleeping. This time, Jean Wan did not sleep well. Perhaps it was because Mo Jingshin did not continue sleeping. She was the only one on the bed. Less than an hour later, she woke up again. The moment she sat up, she saw Mo Jingshin dressed in a dark brown bathrobe. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling bay window, slender and silent. She was about to lift the blankets and get off the bed when she recalled that her clothes from yesterday were all wet in the bathroom. They had also been pulled onto the floor by him. Right now, they were most likely all bunched up and could not be worn again. Her gaze shifted and saw Mo Jingshin's clothes on the sofa not far from the bed. She quietly reached over, picked up a shirt, and put it on. Then, she tiptoed barefoot to the bathroom. Mo Jingshin sensed her movements. He turned around and saw that the little woman was wearing a shirt. Her entire leg was exposed. It was as white and smooth as porcelain. From time to time, he would be able to see the scenery under the shirt with a single step. Jean Wan did not notice that he had already discovered that she was awake. She softly entered the bathroom and quietly closed the door. She picked up the clothes on the floor and placed them on the glass countertop by the side. She then reached out to wash her face. The effects of last night's alcohol had completely dissipated. Jean Wan thought about what happened at the banquet last night as she picked up the facial cleanser provided by the hotel and rubbed it in her hands. The bathroom door was made of a translucent frosted material. A black shadow approached from the door. Jean Wan's movements faltered. She raised her head to see that the door had opened. Mo Jingshin's dark eyes were slightly lowered as he looked at her. His expression was calm and unhurried, but he blocked the bathroom door completely. The bathroom in this hotel was not as big as the one at home. The door also appeared much smaller compared to his height. Although the door was clearly blocked, Jean Wan strangely felt that between his brows there was a lingering emotion from last night's events, especially his usually cool and indifferent gaze. At this moment, it was as though there was a fire that was about to burn the shirt on her body. Jean Wan paused and subconsciously tightened her legs. You want to use the bathroom? I'll go out after washing my face. As she spoke, she raised the foam in her hands. It'll be done in a moment. Mo Jingshin watched her, slowly and hoarsely making an N sound. He took 2 steps in. Dash. Chapter 109. Mo Jingshin dragged her over, pressing her against the glass countertop. He lowered his head to kiss her, gently nibbling and sucking on her lips. His sudden kiss caused Jean Wan's legs to soften. She almost lost her balance. Her entire body was enveloped by his scent. The man's scent was cold and persistent, possessing his unique warmth. She was wearing a shirt which barely covered her thighs. He only had to lift his eyes slightly to see her tightly pressed legs through the full-length mirror in the bathroom behind her. Jingshin held her even tighter, pressing her against his body as he kissed her even more deeply. The bathroom was small, and the temperature climbed. Steam rose, and the sound of water splashing could be heard from the tap. He pressed the back of her head with one hand and held onto her slender waist with the other, bringing her forward. Jinwon was unable to defend herself and could only lean heavily against his embrace. Jinwon's hands were still wet with the foam from the facial cleanser. She did not dare to push him away. Her body did not have any support, and the sound of water was by her ears, causing her mind to be in chaos. She suddenly wanted to reach over to turn off the tap. However, the moment she moved, Jingshin mercilessly bit down on the tip of her tongue. Jinwon instinctively struggled slightly. She was kissed and dodged to the side, softly crying out. He chuckled mischievously, speaking softly by her ears. "Why are you hiding? Dressed like this, what do you want to do?" Jinwon softly panted as she dodged. "Last night, when I helped you shower, my clothes were all wet. If I don't wear yours, don't tell me I can." Jingshin smiled. His eyes were dark and deep, extremely alluring. "There's no one else here, and the air conditioner is warm enough. You can choose not to wear it." Jinwon directly glared at him. "I'm not an exhibitionist. Besides, I just wanted to wash my face. I didn't want to do anything." He purposely moved his hand under his shirt. Jinwon's entire body trembled from the invasion of his fingers. She only heard the man's teasing voice by her ears. "You didn't want to do anything? Then what's going on here?" Jinwon's entire body suddenly stiffened. Her face was flushed red. She lowered her head and buried it in his neck. She softly whimpered, her body trembling slightly. Jingshin pushed her up again and again. When she could no longer hold on, he pressed her down harshly. After tossing and turning the bathroom for a while, he chuckled hoarsely. "Shall we go out?" "Jinwon, put me down first." Jingshin smiled and didn't let go of her. He carried her out. She buried her head in his neck, and her toes curled up because of the place where they were connected. As soon as he put her on the bed, she was pinned under his body. Looking at her long hair spread out, he pulled a strand of it to his lips and kissed it. Jinwon panted softly and could not help but laugh. She raised her hand to pull her hair back, grumbling, "It's so early in the morning and you're already like this. Do you really have to take half my life?" He casually pinched her hair and slid it down her collarbone. When Jinwon couldn't stand the teasing and trembled, he snorted at her reaction and chuckled softly against her ear. "I've been so busy these days that I can only go home after midnight. My woman sleeps by my side, and I can only hug her, but can't eat her. Can't you let me get back some interest?" "You can wake me up," he smiled. "I can't bear to." "Then you can bear to do it now?" "I woke up hungry in the morning. You're still squeezing me like this." Jingshin made an end sound. "Very tired? Then I'll slow down." Jinwon slowed down. He was clearly using a different method to slowly and patiently torment her. Jinwon was tormented by his suddenly slowing movements. Her entire body felt numb, and she suddenly raised her body cooperatively. Jingshin raised his brows, abruptly retreating along with her movements. The more she took the initiative to approach, the more he retreated. After going back and forth several times, Jinwon was angered by him. She reached out to push him hard. "Bastard, you're doing this on purpose." Seeing that her charming expression was mixed with anger, Jingshin's lips curved. Abruptly, he sent himself in deeply and heavily. Jinwon had wanted to push him away, but in the blink of an eye, this action caused her to moan. She could no longer say a word as she glared at him. After a long while, she finally managed to catch her breath. She weakly and hoarsely complained, "I've really been tricked by your appearance. You're really a beast." Jingshin chuckled softly. "You're dressed like this in front of me. If I'm not moved, then I'm worse than a beast." Jinwon, she was actually speechless. 2 hours later, Jinwon was finally able to climb up from the bed to eat. Jingshin was still considerate enough to push the dining cart the hotel staff had brought into her bedside, saving her from the pain of getting off the bed. After all, right now, her legs were really weak. In the future, no matter what happens, remember to ask me first. Don't let your imagination run wild and be unhappy. Remember? Mo Jingshin handed the cutlery to her. His gaze was stern, as though the ruffian from this morning was not him at all. Jinwan bit on the fragrant and delicious enoki mushroom, raising her eyes to say, "Yesterday, I didn't understand the situation clearly. It's my fault, but you should at least remind me. Otherwise, if it was any other woman, they would not be able to accept it." Mo Jingshin raised his brows. "You still have the energy to discuss right and wrong with me?" "Jinwan, I don't." He snorted, but did not tease her further. He allowed her to eat in peace. Only when Jinwan was full did Mo Jingshin's unhurried and calm voice ring out. "Do you remember what you promised me last night?" "And what did I promise?" Jinwan could not remember what she had promised. She raised her eyes in surprise. Mo Jingshin's gaze darkened. His gaze was cold. "You promised not to see Sheng Yihan again. Are you selectively amnesiac?" She was quiet for a moment before directly asking, "Do you know a lot about me? For example, before we got married, or even a few years earlier?" Mo Jingshin did not answer. His gaze toward her was unfathomable and unfathomable. After a moment, he raised his hand to pinch her cheek. "You have to keep your promises, and I can do that, but you haven't answered me. Do you really know a lot about my past?" "But in my impression, before we got married, I didn't have much interaction with the Mo family or you. Previously, when Ji Mingran mentioned Sheng Yihan, you automatically ignored it. Later on, you didn't even mention it. But from last night until now, you clearly don't know anything about my past." Mo Jingshin's hand paused on her lips. His warm fingers caressed her lips as he unhurriedly said, "That's not important. You just have to remember, you're Mrs. Mo." Jinwan's heart shrank from the warmth on her lips. What kind of answer is that? Chapter 110. Jinwan was slightly stunned. In the next second, he had already kissed her. "Why are you kissing whenever you want to? Just kissing." Mo Jingshin's words carried a hint of teasing. Was he going to do it again? Could it be that feeding her earlier was just to save up energy? After a kiss, he finally released her. He placed his palm behind her head, pressing against her forehead as he watched her. Mrs. Mo once said, "No one can have any ideas about your man." He lowered his head to admire the moisture in her eyes, watching with satisfaction as she was kissed into a daze. On the other hand, if anyone dares to have any ideas about Mrs. Mo, I definitely won't be polite. Mo Jingshin actually had such a domineering side, yet it did not appear to be intentional. Furthermore, this man's domineering side did not make her unhappy. Instead, it made her instinctively want to express her stance. In the past, her relationship with Sheng Yihan had always been a one-sided problem. It had nothing to do with her. Jinwan stared at him and suddenly took the initiative to hug his shoulders. She raised her head and kissed him harshly on the lips. Under the man's dark and turbulent gaze, she sincerely said, "All right." This one word was so sincere that it was as though she wanted a hand over the little world hidden in her heart to his hands. Mo Jingshin lowered his eyes, pressing her down on the bed. Jinwan fell back, looking at the man on top of her. In front of others, this clear and gentle man was the unapproachable CEO Mo. But at this moment, he was seductive like a fiery and bewitching demon. There was no one else like him. On the other side, even after the banquet ended, and Shuyan did not see Mo Jingshin return, everyone in Haiqing knew that Mo Jingshin was a cold and rational person. Yet, this man who was never affected by his emotions actually made an exception for Jinwan. Early in the morning, and Shuyan met Mo Xiaoza at the staircase of Wang Ting Hotel. Uncle Mo, and Shuyan politely nodded at him. Mo Xiaoza glanced at her, asking sternly, "Your complexion is so bad. You didn't sleep last night?" And Shuyan smiled slightly. "I slept. Perhaps I slept too late. My complexion doesn't look good. Everything you've seen and heard in the country these days, is it the same as last night?" Jing Shun is serious about that, Jinwan. Mo Xiao's expression was dark, and Shuyan hesitated for a moment and did not speak. Instead, she slowly nodded her head. Mo Xiao's first raised his eyebrows in extreme dissatisfaction, then narrowed his eyes coldly. After a moment, Mo Xiao's said slowly, "Since that's the case, do you still want Mrs. Mo's identity?" And Shuyan was silent for a long time. She took 2 deep breaths, her gaze filled with stubbornness. "Uncle Mo, what you should be asking me is, do I still want this man, Mo Jingshin?" Without waiting for Mo Xiaoza to speak, her voice was soft but firm. "My answer is I want it." Mo Xiaoza looked at her sternly for a long time before finally waving his hand at her. "All right, I understand. Go back and rest." And Shuyan nodded at him respectfully. "Thank you, Uncle Mo." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around. When Shinmu brought her phone over, Jinwan was drying her hair in the bathroom. The sound of the wind was too loud. She only knew that Shunmu had brought her bag and Mo Jingshin's things over. When she walked out after drying her hair, Shunmu was respectfully and softly speaking to Mo Jingshin outside the door. "All right, CEO Mo, I understand." Mo Jingshin indicated that he could leave. Shunmu nodded and turned to smile politely at Jinwan before turning to leave. "Neither of us brought our phones. How did Shunmu know we were here?" Jinwan glanced at the back view of him walking toward the elevator. She casually asked as he closed the door. Mo Jingshin calmly glanced at her, using his chin to point at the phone in the room. She took her bag and searched for the clothes she wore in the car yesterday, but only the clothes inside. Her coat was still left in Shang Yihan's car. Jinwan finally realized what was going on. She took her bag and searched for the clothes she wore in the car yesterday. She hesitated for a moment and did not dare to mention Shang Yihan's name. After changing her clothes, she found that her phone had been out of battery since last night. She took out the charger from her bag and placed the phone on the bedside table. However, the moment she charged the phone and turned it on, she heard the sound of several text messages. The first one that popped up on the screen was from an unfamiliar number. "Rest well." It was a very ordinary word, but it was so concise that there was not even a punctuation mark. Jinwan stared at the 4 words, her fingers pausing on the screen. After a long moment of confusion, she finally guessed who it was. She opened the phone's photo album and found the record of Xia Tian's diagnosis. There was a page with Xia Tian's attending doctor's phone number. It was indeed Shang Yihan. All these years, she and Shang Yihan had tacitly ignored each other. Even when they passed each other in the hospital, it was as though they were strangers. He was his orthopedic doctor, and she was her Mrs. Mo. They had long had nothing to do with each other, but now he suddenly appeared in her sight with ulterior motives. What was the reason? Was it because he was about to officially return to the Shang family? Was it because one of the 4 large families in Haicheng would belong to him? Was he really, as she had once seen him, hiding a monstrous ambition under his handsome appearance? Mo Jingshin had just made a call to the company. When he turned his gaze back from the window, he saw her thoughtful expression and asked, "What's wrong?" Jinwan raised her head, her gaze pausing on the man's overly gentle and perfect face. Her expression remained calm, but her fingers quickly moved to delete the message that should not have appeared. "Nothing." Mo Jingshin looked at the woman by the bed, narrowing his eyes. The little girl's fingers quickly tapped on the screen of her phone. He only glanced at her indifferently before he strode over and took her phone from her. Jinwan wanted to reach out to snatch it back, but retracted her hand due to the man's indifferent expression. That message had already been deleted. Mo Jingshin was currently looking at the top unread message. It was from Xia Tian. 3 consecutive messages. "Mine Wan, my little heart has been shocked. I've already been unable to sleep for several days. That Dr. Sheng is simply too handsome. After interacting with him for so many days in the hospital, I actually didn't realize how good his looks are." Are you really familiar with Dr. Sheng? Does he have unidirectional autism? Otherwise, why is he usually so cold? He doesn't even say a word of superfluous nonsense. With just a glance, he can freeze a person half to death. On account of that face of his, I'll forgive this iceberg. I still can't sleep. Also, This Dr. Sheng's facial features are extremely well proportioned. The bridge of his nose is very straight. Isn't it said that a man's nose is directly proportional to his lower body? This iceberg may appear refined in his white coat, but it completely cannot conceal his powerful nature. Sob, sob. My heart is moved. I really want to sleep with him. Wan, since you've known him before, have you never had feelings for Dr. Sheng before? Seeing Mo Jingshen's unperturbed expression, the surrounding temperature clearly dropped several degrees. Jinwan held her forehead. Chapter 111. Just from these few messages, she felt that her life was about to end soon. Best friends always spoke without restraint. In their messages, they dared to say all sorts of dirty jokes. This was practically stabbing a knife into Mo Jingshen's eyes. Then she saw Mo Jingshen's gaze. It was as though there were knives shooting toward her. His gaze was cold and filled with coldness. Cold rain, autumn frost, snow on the summit of a mountain, and many other words were unable to describe his piercingly cold expression. Cough. Jinwan raised her hand guiltily to push the loose strands of hair behind her ear, calmly explaining, This is how we women chat in private. We don't care if it's meat or vegetables. Mo Jingshen glanced at her heavily. He still did not return the phone to her. His sharp gaze scraped her from top to bottom. The way you talk without restraint is to study a man's nose? Jinwan, although she was not thinking of such a thing, her gaze unconsciously drifted toward Mo Jingshen's nose. She vaguely remembered that when they first got married, because she always resisted this marriage, Xia Tian had earnestly and patiently nagged about how this man, Mo Jingshen, was and whatnot. She also seemed to have said that Mo Jingshen's nose was tall and straight. Although he looked like an ascetic male god, his size was definitely not small. In any case, she had evaluated Mo Jingshen from all aspects and did not forget to be infatuated with him for several days. She said that it was a waste for Jinwan to not sleep with a man like this. Her gaze suddenly met Mo Jingshen's. Jinwan abruptly returned to herself and immediately reached out to snatch the phone back. The private conversations between women have always been nondescript. We talk about whatever comes to our minds. Only you men are allowed to admire a woman's black stockings, beautiful legs, and high heels in the summer, but we women are not allowed to occasionally talk about such topics. Jinwan tried to defend herself as she tried to snatch the phone back. Mo Jingshen coldly glanced at her. He raised his hand slightly and brushed the phone away from her hand, not letting her have her way. When have you ever seen me pay attention to a woman's body below her shoulders? His tone was unkind. Jinwan rolled her eyes. Every day, you toss and turn me. Don't talk about below the shoulders. Even below the waist has been seen by you, all right? Not to mention looking around, he had kissed her from top to bottom, inside and out. Mo Jingshen chuckled coldly at her unreasonableness. Apart from you, I don't care. In any case, return my phone to me first. Jinwan could not win against him. She jumped onto the bed barefooted and pounced over to snatch it back. Seeing her pounce on him, Mo Jingshen didn't dodge or raise his hand. When she finally touched the phone, he pressed his arm against her waist and pressed her whole body into his arms. Jinwan was caught off guard and fell forward. She stumbled so hard that half of her body fell toward him, and her entire face was pressed against the man's chin. She was about to step back with the phone in her hand when the strong arm behind her waist tightened. The man's low voice rang by her ear. For the sake of the private conversation between you women, Mrs. Mo is even willing to throw herself into your arms. You are clearly the one who suddenly pressed down on my waist. Jinwan raised her head to explain. The moment she raised her head, her lips brushed past his. She had yet to react when the man held the back of her head and kissed her. She could not stand steadily on the bed. Half of her body was pressed against his. She twisted her waist and held the phone tightly in her hand. This position, she could not tell if it was ambiguous or awkward. In any case, this kiss was not ambiguous at all. Instead, it was more like a punishment. It was so heavy that it robbed her of all her breath. Only when Jinwan's tongue was numb from the kiss did the man release her. His gaze no longer had any warmth as it landed on her phone. Before the sky turns dark, arrange for her to be transferred to another orthopedic hospital. This was the undeniable sentence Immerse said by Jin Wan's lips just as she was about to suffocate from the kiss. Transfer. She looked at him. 2 days ago, I did have this intention, but Xia Tian's legs can't move. If she gets hurt during the transfer, you're worried about the person I sent? Immerse lowered his head, indifferently glancing at her. His goal was to keep her away from Sheng Yihan, while her goal was to keep Xia Tian away from that scumbag. Regardless of the reason, it was a good thing for Xia Tian to leave her current hospital. It could be considered as settling the matter once and for all. All right, then. Which hospital should she be transferred to? I'll arrange it. Oh. Jin Wan responded and glanced at him from time to time. He clearly minded those few messages earlier. He minded it a lot. If he had seen Sheng Yihan's message, it was likely that it would not be as simple as transferring Xia Tian's hospital. Jin Wan was thankful that her hands were fast enough to delete that message. At the same time, she was cursing that bastard Xia Tian in her heart. She really caused so much trouble. It was fine if she liked to chat dirty jokes with her. She could talk about which muscular male celebrity on the television or which male model with hormones bursting out of control. But she actually talked about Sheng Yihan. She had seen people dig holes for their bosom friends, but she had never seen someone dig holes like this. Xia Tian, that idiot. Jin Wan lowered her head. She replied to Xia Tian's message while informing her of the transfer and celebrating that she could finally break free from the iceberg. She then ignored Xia Tian's cries of pain and raised her eyes to look at Immerse. That's right. She took the initiative to change the topic. At the hospital, there's a bank owner chasing after Xia Tian, but he's a scumbag from head to toe. Can you do me a favor and prevent that man from getting close to Xia Tian again? It's best if he's thrown to Africa and never to return. Immerse glanced at the woman who looked like she wanted to forget about the earlier incident. He calmly asked, "What bank?" "I think it's a private bank in Haicheng. It has financial dealings with banks in Hong Kong and Taiwan." Immerse's tone was heavy. "It's just a small to medium-sized financial company. If they want to send someone to Africa legally, they can just buy it." Jin Wan pursed her lips. "Buy it?" The MO Corporation's business range is very wide. Many of the private banks and financial companies in Haicheng have dealings with the MO Corporation. It's just a small bank. Do you still want to waste your time fighting with him? That was right. Fighting with that kind of scumbag was indeed a waste of time. Buying their bank shares was not only the most direct method, but it was also killing 2 birds with 1 stone. After all, the financial industry was also becoming more and more profitable. Obtaining a relationship with a bank was also a kind of gain. Buying it would not be a loss. Jin Wan suddenly smiled. She held onto his arm and took the initiative to act spoiled. "Thank you, hubby. Hubby is the best. Hubby is the best." Chapter 112. Jin Wan reached out to tug on his sleeves. As she tugged, she blinked at him with incomparable sincerity. "I've really never had any feelings for Sheng Yihan. You should know that before I married into the MO family, I've never had any official boyfriends, nor do I have any so-called past. I'm practically the model of a clean body and mind." Hearing the word model, Immerse mildly glanced at her. It was clear that he had gained a rare bit of patience from her sincere explanation. Jin Wan took the opportunity to hug his arm. "Before you, I've never loved any man." A trace of a smile appeared on Immerse's face. He reached out to smooth her hair, asking meaningfully, "Is Mrs. M.O. confessing to me? You love me?" And Jin Wan's heart stirred for a moment. Between her and Immerse, there had been all sorts of sweetness and warmth, but the word love had never been mentioned. She had yet to reply when she saw the man's lips curve slightly deeper. It seemed like his mood had suddenly improved. His mood was indeed not bad. Jin Wan's heart was currently in complete turmoil. The question that she had never dared to think about had suddenly leaped out in front of her unintentionally. By the time Jin Wan returned to herself, Immerse's hand had already tangled in her hair. He was watching her with a slight smile. "Aren't you going to continue charging your phone?" Jinwon finally recalled that her phone had only been charged for less than 2 minutes before being unplugged. She rushed to continue charging. When she turned back, she saw that Mo Jingshan had picked up the remote control by the bedside and raised the temperature of the air conditioning by 2 degrees. The man's back view was tall and steady. No matter what time it was, he would always be unhurried and calm. Jinwon suddenly chuckled lightly. Mo Jingshan turned to glance at her. "What are you laughing at?" "Nothing much. It's just that I suddenly realized that the great CEO Mo is like a professional nanny in front of me. No matter if it's hot or cold, he can take care of me meticulously. I should actually be moved to tears. I shouldn't be laughing at all. I admit my mistake." As she spoke, she could not help but laugh out loud. Her eyes curved into crescents as she laughed. Mo Jingshan casually tossed the remote control onto the bed, calmly saying, "It won't be too late to laugh when you learn how to take care of yourself." Jinwon slept again in the afternoon. After all, she had used up all her energy last night and this morning. He only woke up when the sky turned dark. When he woke up, he saw Mo Jingshan sitting on the sofa. In his hands were the company documents that Shanmu had sent over in the afternoon, as well as some files that he needed to look through personally. The sofa in this hotel room was very soft. Mo Jingshan's sitting posture was elegant and proper. This man's beauty seemed to be innate. Even if he was just sitting there quietly looking at the company documents, he would still attract everyone's attention. Jinwon got off the bed. She had just walked over when Mo Jingshan raised his head to look at her. His clear and heavy expression met her sleepy appearance. "You're not going to sleep?" he asked. "It's getting dark. Sleep after 10 o'clock. Otherwise, your schedule will be messed up." Jinwon saw the logo of Shine Group printed on the document in his hand. Knowing that it was a cooperation project with Shine Group, she didn't want to disturb him. Jinwon turned to pour him a glass of water. "Come here," Mo Jingshan called. Hearing this, Jinwon approached the sofa. Mo Jingshan patted the seat beside him, indicating for her to sit down. Jinwon glanced at the water dispenser and gave up on the idea of pouring him a glass of water. She obediently sat down. The man's arms circled around her waist, naturally and intimately holding her in his embrace. His gaze remained focused on the documents in his hands. "Since Shine's project hasn't ended, why didn't you return to the company today? You've wasted the entire day in the hotel with me. I'm already feeling bad." Jinwon took the opportunity to ask as he placed the documents in his hands down. Mo Jingshan mildly curved his lips. He raised his hand to press against his brows. After resting for a few seconds, he picked up the documents again and continued reading. At the same time, his hand around her waist moved up, running through her soft hair. His gaze was on the documents, but his voice was directed at her. "There are just some follow-up matters that require my signature. I've worked overtime for almost a week, so I'll spend more time with you these 2 days." As he spoke, he lowered his head to look at her. "Not just today. My time tomorrow belongs to you as well." From last night until today, the two of them had stayed in this hotel room. Their food and necessities had all been sent up by the hotel staff. Although it was rare for the two of them to have such a pure, undisturbed world, why did Jinwon feel that Mo Jingshan was implying that tomorrow the two of them might have to spend the entire day in bed? When the hotel's dinner arrived, Jinwon nibbled on the pork ribs while thinking about how she could enjoy such a warm and peaceful vacation time with Mo Jingshan while perfectly avoiding contact with the bed. "Why isn't there a single vegetable dish in the hotel's meal tonight?" Jinwon asked as she ate. "We've stayed in a room for an entire day and even had a stomach full of meat at night. Why don't we find a place to pick some vegetables and fruits to cook for ourselves tomorrow? Is there any specialized organic vegetable garden in Haicheng?" Mo Jingshan glanced at her as though he could instantly see through her thoughts. After 2 seconds, he said, "There is. I'll bring you there tomorrow." Jinwon placed another piece of pork ribs into her mouth, her heart filled with joy. She finally found a perfect excuse to avoid the bed. The next day, Jinwon had just pushed open Mo Jingshan's car door and stepped out when she saw a cluster of villas located in the wealthy area of Haicheng. Although it was a cluster of villas, it was a priceless area in Haicheng. There were not many people living here because not everyone could live here. How could there be a vegetable garden in a place like this? Did you bring me here to pick the grass? Jinwan suspected that she had been tricked by him and turned back to ask. Mo Jingshin parked the car and walked over. Go to Qin's sightings place. You can pick whatever you want. Ah, this is where Dr. Qin lives? Jinwan was astonished. He lives here alone. The backyard of the villa is spacious. In recent years, the Qin family's elder likes to grow his own vegetables and fruits. There isn't enough space at home, so he took over Qin's sightings backyard. Jinwan's gaze shifted toward the villa. So, behind such a beautiful, high-class villa in Dr. Qin's home, there's actually a vegetable garden? This strange scene. As they spoke, a low-profile gray sports car drove in from the empty road. Originally, it was about to drive past them when it suddenly braked. The car window rolled down, revealing Qin's sightings' slightly surprised, handsome face. What's the situation? Why'd you come to my place? Jinwan felt as though she was about to steal vegetables, but was discovered by the owner. She raised her hand and awkwardly waved at him. Hi, Dr. Qin. Qin's sightings gaze shifted down, noticing the basket in Jinwan's hands. He did not know where she had gotten it from. Chapter 113. The security of this villa area was very strict. Thankfully, Qin's sighting returned in time, saving Jinwan a lot of unnecessary trouble. She followed him in. After receiving permission, Jinwan carried the basket all the way to the back of the villa. Qin's sighting glanced at the floor-to-ceiling window behind him. He watched the woman in the backyard with a lukewarm smile on his lips as he leaned against the wine cabinet by the side. He took out a bottle of aged red wine and poured it into a goblet. He handed a glass to Mo Jingshin, swirling the wine in the glass as he casually said, You really have endless ways of coaxing a woman. You even selflessly contribute to me. Mo Jingshin's lips curved imperceptibly. He took a sip of the wine and placed the glass down. When did your taste become so bad? He mildly mocked. Qin, sighting, coldly snorted. I have at least 5 to 6 operations in the hospital every day. I'm so busy that I don't even have time to go home. The wine cabinet is filled with gifts from others. There are both good and bad ones. It's already not bad to have a few drinkable bottles. You're still picky? Mo Jingshin coldly said, I'll ask Shinmu to send 2 bottles over another day. Qin's sighting raised his brows, placing down the wine glass. He could not hold back his laughter as he said, It turns out this transaction is still worth it. Your wine is all 80 years old, high-quality wine. A basket of vegetables and fruits can be exchanged for 2 bottles of good wine. In the future, can I quit my job and focus on nurturing this vegetable field? It's even more profitable than being a doctor. Although Mo Jingshin was slightly disgusted, he still picked up the glass of wine and took a sip. A moment later, he indifferently said, Ever since that woman kicked you away and went overseas, your quality of life and taste have been plummeting. I really can't stand it anymore. Qin's sighting poured another glass of wine, but his smile did not reach his eyes. He turned to glance at Jinwan, who was picking vegetables excitedly behind him. He narrowed his eyes to say, Brothers are like limbs, women are like clothes. This old man has gotten used to being naked these years. Mo Jingshin's cold brows moved. He mockingly glanced at him. Who was the one who almost broke his own limbs for a woman? You speak as though you've seen through the mortal world. Do you really think you're a vegetarian monk? Qin's sighting frowned without batting an eyelid. He did not speak at first, but a moment later, he poured a glass of wine and drank it in one gulp. Putting down the wine glass heavily, Qin's sighting sneered coldly. So what if you have a woman? Impressive. Qin's sighting choked and stared at him with a smile. He then raised his hand and pressed between his brows. I'm going to the back to see your woman. Don't King discuss me here. Jinwan was currently picking vegetables from the vegetable field in the backyard. She did not expect Dr. Qin's backyard to be so large. There were all kinds of vegetables and fruits. Although it was autumn, more than half of the backyard was covered with a greenhouse that could gather sunlight and heat. It could be seen that the Qin family's elder was indeed fond of these things. He even arranged such professional autumn and winter planting facilities so appropriately. Although the style of this vegetable garden and orchard was really out of place in this high-class villa area, standing in this lush green field was really relaxing and refreshing. Most importantly, Dr. Chen's home was very clean. The fruits and vegetables in the backyard were also grown especially well. There was no need to worry about pesticides or other chemicals like the orchards outside. Jinwan plucked a bright red tomato and casually plucked the cabbage by the side. It was fresh and juicy. Even though it had not been washed or cooked, it was already stimulating one's appetite. Abruptly, she heard footsteps from nearby. She turned to see Chen Siding leisurely approaching. He glanced at the things in her basket, and a trace of a smile flashed past his eyes. Mrs. Mo is so carefree. I almost thought you came here for a vacation. Chen Siding walked over, casually picking up a cabbage from the basket. And speaking of which, it seems like our Chen family can also expand into the agricultural vegetable industry in the future. For these kinds of vegetables, 100 yuan per piece is not too much. Thankfully, you're not interested in the Chen family's company. Otherwise, with your scamming behavior, the Chen family would be ruined in a few years. Jinwan half-jokingly plucked another tomato. She casually wiped it in her hands and took a bite. Chen Siding glanced at her. You're eating it without washing it? There are no pesticides on it. It's not like there's anything wrong with eating it. Jinwan's mood was especially good due to the sweet and sour taste in her mouth. She completely ignored Chen Siding's disgusted expression and used her other hand to pluck another tomato for him. Seeing that he did not take it, she raised her eyebrows and tossed it into the basket. I know you doctors are all misophobic, but don't be so spoiled, all right? You don't even want to eat something so natural. Don't tell me you only drink disinfectant every day. Chen Siding stood casually with his arms crossed. He casually and indifferently glanced at her. The spoiled G family's young miss actually dares to say someone else is spoiled. Ah, are you slapping your own past face? Have you forgotten what kind of temper you had in the past? People change, Yi Zichen said. Jinwan did not look at him. She lowered her head to inspect the vegetables in the basket. Her tone was warm and calm. Regardless of whether it was in the past or now, I'm still me. It's normal for my personality and habits to change a little. Chen Siding suddenly laughed mockingly, coldly, and indifferently, saying, Indeed, women are all fickle. Jinwan's hand, that was fiddling with the vegetables in the basket, suddenly paused. She vaguely heard some deeper meaning in his tone and instinctively felt that Chen Siding had a story. She raised her head and glanced at him. Chen Siding did not look at her again. When he turned around, he coldly threw down a sentence. Be careful. Don't step on the radishes and potatoes on the ground. If you damage them, my family's elder will directly look for your family's Mo Jingshan to settle the score. Jinwan paused. She lowered her head to look at the things planted in the soil by her feet. Earlier on, she did not pay attention to this side. Thankfully, she did not step on them. The fruits are all at the back. If it's too high, take a ladder and pick them yourself. Last night, you could even jump out of the window. Climbing a tree shouldn't be difficult for you. While speaking, Chen Siding glanced at her with a hint of smile. When Jinwan directly rolled her eyes at him, he used a shin to point not far away. The ladder is over there. It's very safe. You won't fall. Thanks. Jinwan took another bite of the tomato in her hand and turned ahead to the orchard behind. It was as though they had a great harvest. Jinwan happily held the basket full of vegetables as she walked back from the back. Dr. Chen, is the kitchen in your house usable? Jinwan asked excitedly. Chen Siding narrowed his eyes. So you're not only here to pick vegetables, but you're really treating my place as a holiday villa? You even want to start a fire and cook? Not only do we want to start a fire, we're also planning to stay here tonight. Do you have any objections? Chen Siding leaned against the door. It's been 2 months, and I finally have a rare day off. Just for this one day, I have to watch the two of you show off your affection in front of me. It hurts my eyes. Dash. Chapter 114. You don't want to see? Mo Jingshan casually tossed a high-class residential area access card onto the coffee table in front of Chen Siding. Aolon International belongs to you tonight. Limited to guest rooms. The password is Jinwan's birthday. Chen Siding lightly snorted. How would I know when your woman's birthday is? Jean had already entered the kitchen with the basket in her hands. However, she could still hear Qin Siding's voice from outside. Furthermore, I'm not stupid. Why would I run to your place to eat takeout when the food is delivered to my mouth? As he spoke, Qin Siding casually tossed his coat aside and elegantly sat down on the sofa. It was as though he was prepared to wait for Jean to prepare a sumptuous meal for them. Jean walked out and saw Qin Siding's expression as though he was waiting to enjoy himself today. She could not help but laugh. She found an apron and wrapped it around her neck before returning to the kitchen. Speaking of which, does Jean know how to cook? Qin Siding finally remembered the most serious problem. His brows rose. Mo Jingshen did not reply. His suit had long been placed aside. He casually unbuttoned his sleeves and rolled up his sleeves. He indifferently and coldly said, "To be able to taste my woman's cooking, you should say that you're blessed for 3 lifetimes." Qin Siding snorted, clearly not believing him. "Are you serious? Will I get food poisoning today?" Mo Jingshen, you can choose to starve or not eat. By the time he finished speaking, Mo Jingshen had already entered the kitchen. Seeing that Jean was washing vegetables, he approached. "What else do you need to wash? I'll help you." Jean did not raise her head, continuing to wash the vegetables seriously. "There's no need. I could do it myself. Dr. Qin's house usually has helpers coming over to clean or cook. There's nothing lacking in this kitchen. It's easy to find. I can handle it myself." As she spoke, she turned to pick up the peeler to peel the potatoes. Her back was facing Mo Jingshen. The man approached from behind, helping her tie the 2 straps on the back of her apron. "Did the straps come loose?" "Earlier on, my hands were wet, so I casually tied it. I didn't pay much attention." Jean turned back to glance behind her before raising her eyes to smile at Mo Jingshen. The little woman smiled gently, turning back to continue washing the vegetables. Her serious appearance caused Mo Jingshen to be unable to shift his gaze away. The kitchen seemed to be in harmony. Even now, Qin Siding deeply suspected that Jean, who had always been a pampered young lady, would actually cook. From the sound of it, there was no messiness in the kitchen or the sound of pots and pans falling to the ground. It was steady, orderly, harmonious, and calm. The sound of vegetables being washed and cut was more like the most soothing rhythm in the world. Jean really knew how to cook. This realization caused Qin Siding to start doubting his life. I ate meat last night, and now it's all vegetarian again." Jean suddenly poked her head out from the kitchen door, looking at Qin Siding, who was sitting on the sofa and doubting his life. "Dr. Qin, you should be familiar with this area, right? Can you go to the supermarket and help me buy some fish and some meat suitable for stir-frying?" Qin Siding raised his brows and glanced at her in surprise. "You want me to buy it? Don't tell me you want me to go." Jean raised her still wet hands. "I'm still washing and cutting the vegetables. Going back and forth is too much of a waste of time. Where's your man?" Qin Siding casually placed a hand on the back of the sofa. "Jingshan is helping me. He's not very familiar with this area." As Jean spoke, she chuckled at him. "Dr. Qin, if you want to eat early, I'll have to trouble you to run an errand. Otherwise, all of us will have to starve. Troublesome." Qin Siding complained impatiently, but he still got up. He picked up his coat and placed it on his arm. Then he picked up the electronic car key and strode out the door. Jean turned back to the cupboard, only to see that in just a short while, Mo Jingshen had already helped her separate the vegetables she had washed and put them away. Then she saw the man in a shirt and trousers mixing the seasonings of each dish in proportion to each bowl. The man was tall and straight to begin with. Now that he was standing here doing all this, the difference from a high-ranking elite to a housekeeper actually gave rise to a kind of warmth that could warm people to death. Most of the things she needed to do had already been done by him. Thus, Mo Jingshen was not helping her at all. Instead, it was clearly she who was helping him. TSK. In that case, what Mo Jingshen had said to Qin Siding earlier should be. To be able to taste Mo Jingshen's cooking, it was definitely Qin Siding's fortune of 3 lifetimes. Qin Siding followed Jinwan's request and bought raw fish, meat, and other fresh ingredients. He threw the shopping bag into the kitchen and did not pay them any more attention. He returned to the bathroom to wash his hands twice. Jinwan saw it and leaned against Mo Jingshan's side to mutter, "I heard that doctors have the habit of washing their hands dozens of times a day. It seems like this is true." Mo Jingshan smiled and did not say anything. The man's arms that were exposed from his sleeves were firm and strong. He placed the pot on the stove, his movements smooth and handsome. Jinwan cut the newly bought meat, while softly asking, "Is it really because Dr. Qin has loved to learn medicine since he was young that he gave up the inheritance rights to the Qin family's company and insisted on becoming a doctor?" Mo Jingshan's tone was mild. "No. Huh? No. Then could it be that he was forced?" Jinwan was shocked. Mo Jingshan did not reply. He lowered his gaze to see that when Jinwan cut the meat, the sharp knife would always brush past her fingers. Although her fingers were not cut, his brows still furrowed imperceptibly. He calmly said, "Go to the back and pick some vegetables suitable for making a salad. You can just make a simple fruit and vegetable salad." "All right." Hearing this, Jinwan placed the knife and her hand down. She washed her hands and turned to pick up her small vegetable basket to head out. In the backyard, Jinwan picked out various fresh vegetables. The kitchen was also quiet. Qin's sighting leisurely lay on the sofa, preparing to sleep for a while before waking up to eat. In the end, the moment he closed his eyes, the sound of footsteps approached. His calf was abruptly kicked. Qin's sighting opened his eyes to see Mo Jingshan holding a shining, silver kitchen knife in his hand. His gaze was cold and sharp. "Come over and help me. Isn't there Jinwan? How am I supposed to help you?" Qin's sighting did not move. "If you want to eat, then go in and cut the meat for me." Mo Jingshan coldly tossed down these words before turning to head back. Qin's sighting rubbed his brows. He stood up and walked to the kitchen door with his arms crossed. He lazily said, "My hand that holds the scalpel still needs to help you cut the meat? Why don't you let Jinwan finish cutting before going out?" Mo Jingshan did not turn his head back. "She's not suited to use a knife." Qin sighting rolled his eyes. If he was afraid that his woman would cut her fingers, he could just say it directly. He sounded so dignified as though no one could tell. "I discovered that ever since you had a woman, you've really broken through my understanding of you. The words wife-doting maniac really suits you. Mo Jingshan, you flatter me." Chapter 115. Finally, with the cooperation of the three of them, a feast was prepared. Although most of the dishes were vegetarian, since the great CEO Mo was the chef, they would definitely not be simple dishes. What's more, Dr. Qin was personally in charge of the various fish and meat slices. This table was filled with color, aroma, and taste. It was so perfect that Jinwan wanted to take a photo and post it on her social media. It was a pity that there were no social media apps like WeChat or Weibo. However, Jinwan still secretly took 2 photos, planning to save them in her phone. Mo Jingshan saw her small actions and did not expose her, allowing her to take photos. Jinwan took the opportunity to add Mo Jingshan into the frame as well. With 2 clicks, the handsome head chef Mo and the smiling head surgeon Qin at the back formed a perfect group photo with a feast on the table. "Can we eat now?" Qin sighting pulled out a chair and sat down. "Dr. Qin, do you want to test the poison first?" Jinwan sat down and asked with a teasing smile. "That's good too. Although Mrs. Mo's food doesn't taste very good, at least it won't poison me. However, the one cooking today is CEO Mo. Then that might not be the case." Qin sighting picked up his chopsticks and picked up the nearest dish, tasting it. As he chewed, he was silent for a long time. "How is it? Is it delicious?" Jinwan was like a grandma selling melons, showing off her husband's skills. With the great CEO Mo personally cooking, this kind of rare delicacy is definitely something that can only be encountered by luck. Qin's sighting sneered, not answering if it was delicious or not. "Didn't you say you were the one cooking? How did it become your man's chef?" Jinwan pointed at the salad and fruit salad on the table. "These 2 dishes count as well. What kind of dish is this?" Sheen's sighting snorted as he picked up another vegetable leaf with salad dressing. After tasting it, his brows moved, but he remained silent for a long time. Jinwan smiled. My salad is seasoned with a secret recipe. It tastes different from the other salads you've eaten, doesn't it? Sheen's sighting furrowed his brows and finally gave up resisting. It's indeed not bad. Marriage is truly a magical thing. It can make the great Mo Jingshin willing to cook for a woman, and it can even make the pampered and unparalleled Miss Ji suddenly become a good wife and loving mother. So, Dr. Chin, don't always have a bitter and hateful attitude towards women. You should fall in love and get married. You'd better worry about yourself. Chin's sighting sneered and glanced meaningfully at Jinwan. You haven't even figured out your own man's background, and you still want to pretend to be an emotional expert in front of me. The more mysterious a man is, the more charming he is. Anyway, he's my husband. No matter how unfathomable he is, he's still my husband. Jinwan rolled her eyes at him. Chin's sighting snorted coldly. You're quite confident. Why weren't you confident when you jumped out the window last night? I was drunk last night, so I wasn't sober. Can you argue with a drunk person? Sophistry. Seeing that the two of them were about to start fighting, Mo Jingshin helplessly rubbed his brows. All right, even food can't stop your mouths. As he spoke, he placed a few dishes into Jinwan's bowl. Jinwan had long been hungry. She ignored Chin's sighting's lukewarm and slightly mocking expression and picked up her bowl and chopsticks to eat. In the end, Chin's sighting's appetite also increased, and he ate a lot. Jinwan's heart was proud. She knew that even if Mo Jingshin was no longer a CEO, any restaurant he opened would be filled with guests because of the delicious food. Even a rich young master like Chin's sighting, who had grown up with a golden spoon in his mouth, could be satisfied no matter how crafty his taste was. But he refused to admit it. TSK, TSK. While Jinwan and Chin's sighting were fighting with their eyes, Mo Jingshin smiled mildly and did not speak. In the meantime, the phone on the table vibrated. He casually picked it up and saw that Mo Xiaoza had sent a message. His gaze calmly read the few lines on the screen, and a trace of coldness that was difficult to detect appeared in his eyes. At this moment, Chin's sighting suddenly said, "The taste of the salad dressing you made is indeed very unique. Do you mind helping me make another plate of fruit salad?" Jinwan raised her brows, curling her lips at his sudden admitting defeat. She very generously stood up and headed to the kitchen. In the dining room that was separated from the kitchen by a wall, Chin's sighting's gaze shifted toward Mo Jingshin, asking softly, "What is it?" Mo Jingshin's gaze was cold as he tossed his phone onto the table. Before the phone screen automatically darkened, Chin sighting glanced at it. Then, the moment the phone darkened, he calmly asked, "Is this a warning or a declaration of war?" Mo Jingshin did not speak, his gaze cold. Chin's sighting understood and smiled playfully. "What do you plan to do? After all, this isn't the first time." Mo Jingshin raised his eyelids. After several seconds, he calmly spat out, "There won't be a second time." Chin's sighting raised his brows. "Why don't you arrange someone skilled by Jinwan's side? Nanheng has several well-trained bodyguards under him." That night, Jinwan and Mo Jingshin stayed here. Before returning to the guest room to rest, she handed the pill she had specially brought over to Chin's sighting. The last time she returned to the Ji home, she had used the excuse of her stomach feeling unwell to sneak into Ji Hongwen's room to retrieve these pills. To prevent others from noticing, she had only poured 1 or 2 pills into each bottle. However, these were sufficient for Chin's sighting after a detailed examination. Chin's sighting tossed the pills into a small, transparent glass bottle. He turned back to see that Mo Jingshin was already preparing to bring Jinwan upstairs to rest. "I say, the two of you better not treat this place as a holiday villa. Pay attention to your manners. This old man is still staying downstairs." Chin's sighting's brows revealed the strong unhappiness of a single dog at night. His tone was filled with warning. "The two of you are not allowed to make any noises in my house at night." Jinwan, Mo Jingshin glanced at him lightly and took Jinwan upstairs with his arm around her. The entire day, Jinwan's mood was very relaxed. She also slept very well. As she slept early, she woke up early. The sky had just begun to brighten when she woke up. The morning sun was deep blue, and the sky had yet to brighten. She was about to get off the bed to pour herself a glass of water when she paused. She saw Mo Jingshun standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was dressed in a white shirt and black trousers. He had one hand in his pocket, slender and silent. He was still dressed in the same clothes as yesterday. Jinwan turned to look at the time on her phone. It was not even 6 o'clock. Could it be that he did not sleep the entire night? Jinwan was slightly surprised. She stood up and walked over. The moment she approached, Mo Jingshun turned around. Their eyes met. The man's deep, black eyes watched her face, sweeping across her brows. His voice was gentle and hoarse. "Why did you wake up so early?" Jinwan did not answer, asking in return, "You didn't sleep last night?" Chapter 116. How can I not sleep? Jinwan dragged him to the bedside, forcing him to sit on the edge of the bed. "Now sleep?" Mo Jingshun smiled, holding her hand and placing her on his lap. He kissed the corner of her lips. "You've woken up and are full of energy. Aren't you afraid that I'll exhaust your energy again?" Jinwan turned and bit down on his lips. She lowered her voice to say, "Dr. Qin said that we're not allowed to make any noises. He drank last night and is still sleeping." Mo Jingshun kissed her lips once and then again. Jinwan had just woken up early in the morning, afraid that she would be seduced by him to the point of doing something indescribable in Qin Siding's home. She rushed to press her hand against his chest. Her expression was serious. "By the way, I have to make a trip to the studio tomorrow." And Mo Jingshun smiled mildly. "If you have any problems, remember to tell me. Don't bear it alone. Always remember that you have a husband. They're all small problems left behind by Han Tianyuan. I can handle those unpresentable dregs," Jinwan softly said. Mo Jingshun kissed her on the cheek again. It was a very warm kiss. After a moment, the man spoke softly and huskily. "Recently, Haicheng hasn't been peaceful. The Yu Garden security is better. Move back to the Yu Garden." Jinwan's gaze swept past his calm, handsome face. She did not ask further. "All right, then let's go back." When Jinwan went downstairs, she saw that Qin Siding, who was supposed to head to the hospital early in the morning, was standing by the large window on the first floor. He held a glass of wine in his hand and was currently looking at another villa about 100 meters away. He had drunk last night. Early in the morning, he actually still had wine in his hand. From this angle, she could only see that Qin Siding's back was indescribably dark and cold. He did not seem like the person who usually teased her or liked to tease her. Just his back view alone made him seem like a completely different person. Jinwan turned and returned upstairs. When she saw Mo Jingshun approaching, she raised her hand to her lips and made a shook expression. "Did Dr. Qin drink too much last night? It's already so late, but he hasn't gone to the hospital," Jinwan whispered. Hearing this, Mo Jingshun walked down the stairs. Seeing the scene in front of the window, his gaze indifferently swept toward the villa in front of him that no one had lived in for 4 whole years. There was a limousine parked outside the villa. The engraved iron gate in front of the villa was open, and a few people were moving luggage inside. From the color of the luggage, most of it was for women. With just a glance, Mo Jingshun continued downstairs. His tone was cold and carried a hint of mockery. "She's back. Aren't you going to greet her?" Qin Siding put down the wine glass in his hand and turned around. There was no trace of alcohol in his eyes, and his lips curved into a cold smile. "I have 2 surgeries this afternoon. I have nothing to do in the morning, so I need to sleep for a few hours to conserve my energy. Remember to close the door when you leave." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and walked inside. Jinwan waited for Qin Siding to return to the bedroom before heading downstairs. She saw Mo Jingshun standing there with one hand in his pocket. His expression was indifferent, and he did not seem to be unhappy with Qin Siding's attitude. He also did not feel that it was inappropriate for him to be treated coldly. Jinwan could clearly see that Qin Siding's expression earlier was not normal. Mo Jingshun's expression was also unfathomable. On the way back to the Yu Garden, Jinwan leaned against the seat and flipped through the messages on her phone. In the end, She stopped at the last 2 messages that Xia Tian had sent her yesterday. It can't be. Why did you suddenly want to transfer hospitals? It wasn't easy for me to gain some interest in Dr. Sheng. Jinwan, have you been hiding some evil intentions recently? Are you purposely trying to break my marriage? Oh, I'm so angry. Jinwan curved her lips. Since yesterday, she had not replied. Xia Tian was most likely about to explode from anger. She opened the message page and tapped on the screen. That's right. I came with the evil intentions of cutting off your rotten peach blossoms. Have you already transferred hospitals? In less than half a minute, Xia Tian directly replied. F***CK. You're only replying now. I thought that your sex life with Mo Jingshan had not ended since yesterday. Jinwan rolled her eyes and sent a disdainful emoticon over. Xia Tian, yesterday I don't know where these cold and reserved lunatics in suits came from. The moment they arrived at the hospital, they immediately completed the procedures for me to transfer hospitals. They didn't even give me the slightest chance to resist. Right now, I'm lying on a hospital bed in the new hospital, missing my Dr. Sheng so much. Jinwan, he isn't suitable for you. Don't think about it. You've committed all kinds of rotten peach blossoms this year. Killing one is one. Don't be delusional enough to fall into the swamp of love so quickly, Xia Tian. Weren't you the one who pushed Dr. Sheng to me? You even allowed him to chat with me in the hospital room. He caused me to fall in love. In the end, you're saying that he's also rotten? Jinwan, she held her forehead. I was afraid that you would be harassed by that scum again. Considering that he's your main doctor, I allowed him to watch over you. Who knew that you would be so easily infatuated? Xia Tian, this is called being physically and mentally weak. My bones are all broken. Tell me, how weak am I? How weak am I? I lie here every day, bored to the point of becoming moldy. Why can't I appreciate the various men passing by me? Sorry, the attack of men. Forgive me for not being able to resist. Jinwan, your leg is broken, but your head is still intact, right? It just so happens that my studio has some market analysis stuff that needs someone to handle. I'll send the computer over to you. While you're recuperating, help me share some of the workload. It just so happens that you're good at these things. Xia Tian, I'm heartbroken, and you actually want me to work while I'm injured. Jinwan, it's precisely because you're heartbroken that you're using work to squeeze those useless thoughts out of your head. Besides, you've never been in love before. Why would you be heartbroken? Xia Tian, you're inhumane. Jinwan, from today onwards, I'm your boss. You're to obediently analyze the information of Haicheng's real estate market. Your additional salary will be arranging for various good-looking male doctors to take care of you 24 hours a day. If you're not obedient, I'll have Mo Jingshan arrange for the ugliest doctor to harass you every day. Xia Tian, Jinwan, I'm breaking off all ties with you. I'm going to beat you to death. Jinwan, then you'll have to have the ability to jump now. After sending this message, she did not need to guess to know that Xia Tian was so angry that she smashed her phone. Jinwan smiled and called the studio. She asked Xiaoba to send a laptop to Xia Tian's ward. After arranging everything, the car had already arrived at the U Garden. Mo Jingshan was driving. Jinwan suddenly leaned over and said fawningly, I suddenly feel that your decisive decision to transfer Xia Tian to another hospital is really brilliant. The man glanced at her expression, pressed her brows, and pushed her away. Sit back. You're disturbing my driving. Chapter 117. After entering the U Garden Villa, Xia Tian did not bother sending her any messages and directly called her. Jinwan answered the call while changing her shoes. She did not pay attention and pressed the hands-free button. In an instant, she heard Xia Tian's roar through the phone. I don't care. Since you broke off my marriage, you have to find me a man as handsome, tall, and skilled as Dr. Sheng within half a year. Otherwise, my wounded little heart will never be able to calm down. Jinwan, I want a man. I want a handsome one. Jinwan, you have to compensate me with one. Jinwan, Annie Chun had just arrived at the door and heard the commotion. She almost could not hold back her laughter. Jinwan pursed her lips and rushed to press the hands-free button back. She picked up the phone and pressed it against her ear, lowering her voice. Softer. How far do you want your loud voice to travel? Xia on. Damn, you didn't put on hands-free earlier, did you? That's right. Jinwan turned to CMO Jingshin, who had just entered the door, staring at her with a deep gaze. Jinwan pointed at the phone that had been hung up, explaining, Xia has been in the hospital for so long and is about to collapse from boredom. Right now, she's really love-struck like a love-struck fool. Mo Jingshin was expressionless. If I hear another word about the surname Shang from her mouth, the Xia family will immediately come from S-City to bring her away. From today onwards, she can forget about taking a single step into Haicheng. My conversations with her are always so vulgar. Don't take it to heart. Jinwan knew that if he said it, he would definitely do it. Mo Jingshin indifferently curved his lips. He stared at her, speaking in a low and hoarse voice. Stay away from those men who want to approach you, eh? His tone was calm and emotionless, but there was a hint of warning in it. The next day, Jinwan was in the Yu Garden study when 2 videos suddenly appeared in her mailbox. She clicked on them and glanced at them before directly closing them. She then curved her lips into a faint smile, but her eyes were colder. In the evening, she received Mo Jingshin's call. She supported her chin with her hand as she glanced at the computer screen. At the same time, she lazily and hoarsely said, Why are you calling at this time? Don't tell me you're working overtime again? Mo Jingshin chuckled softly, his clear and low voice ringing. You're that afraid of being alone in an empty room? I just don't want you to work too late and drive back. After all, the Yu Garden is a little farther than AO Lawn International. Even if Mrs. Mo lives in the suburbs of Haicheng, I still have to go home. A smile immediately appeared on Jinwan's lips. Her voice was clear and pleasant. She asked gently, Has the Shine Group's cooperation project ended? Actually, she wanted to ask if Shuyin and Mo Xiaoza had already returned to the United States, but when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she changed the way she asked. Mo Jingshin did not reply. After a moment of silence, he said, Tonight, I'll bring you to meet someone. Be good and wait for me at home. Jinwan glanced at the time. What time tonight? Before 6 o'clock. Okay, but I have to go to the studio later. There's a little situation there. I'll probably be back in the evening. Has your studio's financial crisis been resolved? Jinwan paused for a moment. It's all right. It's just a small problem. I can resolve it. Mo Jingshin was quiet for a few seconds. Go early and come back early. Don't wander around for the next 2 days. Got it. Jinwan could more or less guess the meaning behind his words. There must be a reason why he wanted her to return to the Yu Garden. Since he did not say, she did not ask. Before noon, Jinwan left the house and went straight to the studio. The moment she arrived at the studio, Xiao Ba saw her and immediately ran over as though she had seen her savior. Boss Wan, you're finally here. If you came any later, I would have been worried to death. What happened? Earlier on, you were so flustered on the phone. Which investor came to create trouble? Jinwan asked unhurriedly as she walked toward the office. The 2 arrived at the door. Before Xiao Ba could speak, she suddenly heard a woman's voice coming from the office. Every word seemed to be filled with mockery and disdain. Jinwan stood outside the door and listened for a moment. She then pushed the door open and entered. Call your current person in charge over immediately. The 30 million we invested back then has been reduced to 0 in the blink of an eye. It hasn't even been half a year since we invested. We haven't even seen a single dividend, and your company has already changed owners. Right now, you can't even take out the money. You even said that you've merged into some studio. From what I see, this is just an empty city hanging on the name of a studio. Jinwan saw the woman who was standing in front of the office table and pointing at the finance department supervisor. That woman was around 30 years old. She was tall and beautiful, dressed fashionably, and maintained herself well. With one look, she could tell that she was either a manager of some company or a rich wife with a high net worth. Boss, she's CEO Jin. In the past, when CEO Han was still around, CEO Jin's company invested 30 million yuan here on account of their relationship with the Han Corporation. The contract was for 3 years. Every 6 months, they would receive at least 20% interest. However, it has already been more than half a year. Right now, not only has the interest not been transferred to their company's account, even the money they invested is gone. Xiaoba stood by Jin Wan's side, softly explaining the situation. CEO Jin? She's the person in charge of the company called Tianxing Investment? Jin Wan calmly asked. Xiaoba nodded. That's right. CEO Jin, who was standing by the office table, noticed something behind her. She turned back to look at the person by the door. Xiaoba was an intern assistant. CEO Jin's disdainful expression shifted away from her face and landed on Jin Wan. When she saw Jin Wan, her eyes narrowed. Jin Wan wore a white cashmere sweater. It was soft and comfortable, casually fitting to her body. The light brown coat she was wearing was also extremely low-key. She stood there calmly, glancing in CEO Jin's direction. Unlike the others who were submissive, there was a polite yet distant smile in her eyes. Of course, that smile was not very obvious. It was as light as a blink of an eye. CEO Jin coldly snorted. She placed the expensive international brand bag in her hands to the side and turned to seriously size up Jin Wan. Could you be the new boss that these people are talking about? Miss Gio? Hello, I'm Jin Wan. Jin Wan only replied with this one sentence. Her gaze was cold, but not too distant. Unknowingly, she exuded a domineering aura that could control the situation. However, she restrained it well. Chapter 118. Who told you that our studio's finances are in the red? As Jin Wan spoke, her gaze shifted toward the supervisor of the finance department who was standing in her office. Supervisor Su of the finance department was a woman close to 30 years old. She wore a pair of glasses, and her appearance was fair and refined. She had the demeanor of a white-collar elite. However, when Jin Wan's gaze landed on her, her eyes flashed, and she turned her head away in fear to avoid her gaze. CEO Jin pointed at Supervisor Su. Supervisor Su has already taken out all of the financial statements and the bank statements for the past 2 months. Although Miss G doesn't lack this 30 million, running a company isn't like playing house. You must return the money you owe. If you really can't return it, you can always reach out and ask your father for it. I don't care where you got the money from, but you must return it to me in its entirety. CEO Jin pointed at Supervisor Su. Jin Wan's tone was mild, and her lips carried a smile that did not reach her eyes. Since your company signed a 3-year investment contract with us, and you're taking it back after just half a year, are you planning on unilaterally terminating the contract? CEO Jin revealed an expression as though she knew she would say this. She glanced at the man behind her who was carrying a briefcase and coldly smiled. I knew you would say that. You want to use the contract to discuss the breach of contract with me, right? I'll leave my words here. Today, not only will I successfully terminate the contract, the money must also be transferred immediately. Otherwise, don't blame my lawyer for taking you guys to court. Let's see if this studio of yours can continue operating. From start to finish, Jin Wan appeared unaffected by CEO Jin. She walked over and picked up the 2 financial reports and bank statements. After taking a few glances, she abruptly turned to look at the supervisor of the finance department who had been quietly standing by the side. Supervisor Su, Jin Wan called out to her. Supervisor Su did not expect her name to be called. She was startled and turned toward Jin Wan. Miss G, these are all the conclusions you came up with today? Jin Wan asked. Supervisor Su lowered her head, appearing cautious and respectful as she answered. That's right. These are the debts that were left behind when CEO Han was still around. We've already deducted a portion of it from our liquid funds and paid it off. However, there's still a large portion that we still owe. CEO Jin called earlier and said that she wanted to come over to take a look. Yesterday, I worked overtime until very late to retrieve these financial reports. Worked overtime until very late? Jin Wan smiled faintly before shifting her eyes. Her tone was soft, and her emotions were hard to discern. CEO Jin, can you give me 20 minutes to chat with my supervisor? CEO Jin glanced at her with disdain, her face full of ridicule and ridicule. You can get 30 million just by chatting? There were a few people that CEO Jean had brought along, standing in the office. A few of them could not help but burst into laughter. Their eyes were filled with mockery and ridicule, as though they were watching a mere 20-year-old girl putting on a monkey show in this business world where no blood was shed. She smiled as well. G was Jean of Jean of Jean. Jean, Jean was G of Jean. Of G. G Jean of G. G of Nwanli. You're indeed young. I'm afraid you haven't weaned yourself yet. You're really indulging in fantasy. CEO Jean sneered. She walked to the leather sofa in the office and sat down. Raising her delicate eyebrows, she looked at the diamond watch on her wrist and coldly mocked. I'll give you 20 minutes. If you can't take out the 30 million I want after 20 minutes, we'll meet in court. Jean Wan's smile was calm. She held the documents in her hands and turned around. Supervisor Sue, come with me. When they arrived at the office next door, Jean Wan placed the documents in her hands on the table. She turned back to look at Supervisor Sue, who had just entered with an indifferent gaze. The moment she met Jean Wan's gaze, Supervisor Sue's footsteps immediately stiffened. Her eyes were slightly guarded. Miss G, what do you want to talk to me about? Talk about what? What do you think? Jean Wan stared at her with a smile. Your forgery skills are too inferior. Supervisor Sue looked at her in surprise. What do you mean by that? What did I fake? Jean Wan picked up the receipt on the table and threw it in front of her. Did you think that after taking over the company for so many days, I was really just playing house? Supervisor Sue glanced at her and softly explained, Of course, I don't dare to think that way. But right now, the debt deficit is a fact. When the company was in CEO Han's hands, it had already suffered a ridiculous loss. You can't come and settle the debt with me just because an investor has come knocking on our door. I'm only in charge of finance. It's not like I can generate money. If the money is gone, then it's gone. I can't possibly. Jean Wan's brows rose slightly. Her tone was clear and cold. A month ago, there was still around 30 million in the company's treasury. It was used to support the construction of new buildings in the south. This money, in just a month's time, disappeared into thin air. This 30 million was eaten by you? Supervisor Sue's eyes flickered. She stammered, I'm not sure either. A month ago, Miss G, you hadn't taken over the company. That money might have been. Right now, Han Tianyuan has been locked up, but he's still alive. It hasn't reached the stage where the dead can't testify. Jean Wan's voice was cold and did not yield in the slightest. You want to take advantage of the troubled times when the company is changing managers to embezzle the company's funds and take this money for yourself. You have to see who your new owner is. If you want to hide it from my eyes, I'm afraid you'll have to cultivate for a few more years. Supervisor Sue suddenly panicked. She raised her voice to explain, Your words have no proof. Could it be that just because CEO Jean wants to sue the studio, you're going to sell me out? You want me to be your scapegoat? You mean that I've wronged you? Jean Wan's face was expressionless. Since you're so confident, isn't it simple? You'll be sued eventually. Why don't I sue you as well and leave you until the police finish investigating? You want to call the police? Supervisor Sue did not expect things to develop to this stage. Her palms were sweaty. Jean Wan unhurriedly said, Is there a need for me to call the police? CEO Jean is sitting next door. She has already brought a lawyer over. Perhaps she's prepared an even stronger backup plan. The police should be here soon. Supervisor Sue bit down harshly on her lips. Her eyes reddened as she glared at her. She angrily said, Jean Wan, this company is yours. The one who's going to be sued is you. It has nothing to do with me. If you dare to make me a scapegoat, don't blame me for revealing the entire company's business system and secrets. Jean Wan sneered. All right, I want to see if you still have the guts to say those words to me when the evidence is placed before you. Manager Sue's face paled. Evidence? What evidence? Chapter 119. Supervisor Sue had thought that Jean Wan was just a spoiled, rich young lady who had bought 2 companies with some spare cash. She would occasionally come to the company for a meeting, fire a few people, and display her might as a boss. Apart from that, She was just like Han Tianyuan, a piece of trash. However, Jinwan's following words caused Supervisor Su to be unable to maintain her composure. Do you think that just because I don't come to the company, I won't understand the company's situation? I have eyes. I'll investigate and see. You're the head of the finance department. I'm afraid you won't be able to memorize the monthly analysis of the company's financial situation. But I can. Supervisor Su furrowed her brows in disbelief. Jinwan coldly watched her. I know where every single cent is spent, and this 30 million yuan of liquid funds has already been transferred away a month ago. Do you think I haven't discovered this matter? Supervisor Su's eyes reddened. She took a deep breath and tried hard to hide her emotions. Supervisor Su, do you believe me? Ever since the first day I came here, I've already noticed you. I've been waiting for the time when you can't sit still anymore, Jinwan calmly said. At the same time, she took out her phone and data cable from her bag, connecting it to the computer on the table. Not long after, an indescribable video appeared on the computer, as well as the sounds of men and women unable to control themselves. The moment she saw the video on the computer, Supervisor Su turned to look at Jinwan. Her face instantly paled to the point where it lost all color. How did you? When the person in charge of the company was handing over his position, you took advantage of a loophole in the company's finances to embezzle more than 30 million yuan of liquid funds. This is a crime of theft. Jinwan crossed her arms, coldly leaning against the table. Her tone was slow and cold. And today, you use CEO Jin to create trouble, not only to use this matter to escape, but also to make enemies between CEO Jin and CEO Jin. After all, even if I can't keep my studio, I still have the G family and the Mo family behind me. You wanted to use me to get rid of CEO Jin. Am I right? Supervisor Su's eyes widened. She stared at Jinwan as though she was looking at a monster. He couldn't believe it. How did she find out? Jinwan saw the trace of panic in Supervisor Su's eyes. It was extremely cold, and her exquisite facial features became cold and imposing. CEO Jin's husband slept with you before, and the two of you were so passionate that you could have sex in a small hotel that wasn't very safe. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to find such a video. Jinwan glanced at the paused image on the computer screen. The naked man and woman were entangled together, and their faces were very clear in the video. She then glanced at Supervisor Su, who appeared to have been petrified. Jinwan coldly said, CEO Jin's husband is rich and powerful. He's also quite good-looking. You love him so much that you can't extricate yourself. You plan to embezzle the money and leave the studio. You want to be with CEO Jin's husband, so you want to borrow my hands to get rid of him. What if I kill her directly because of a complaint about my studio? You killed two birds with one stone. That's a great way to kill two birds with one stone. When Supervisor Su spoke again, her voice was already trembling. She could no longer maintain her composure. You, Miss G, what exactly do you want? Do you admit to all of this? Jinwan's gaze was sharp as she retorted. What exactly do I have to do to make you delete the video? Supervisor Su did not dare to look at the frozen image on the screen. Her eyes were red, and her emotions were slightly out of control. I won't say any more useless words to you. Jinwan nimbly turned off the computer to avoid being blinded by the video. She kept her phone and unhurriedly said, If you want to be someone else's mistress, I don't care. I don't care about your relationship problems, but you have to return the 30 million yuan you took from here immediately. Immediately? Supervisor Su glared at her. Her complexion was pale as she suddenly said, The money has already been transferred to an overseas account. I have no way of retrieving it now. The moment her words landed, Jinwan took out a recording pen from her bag at almost the same time. You could choose not to return it. CEO Jin is right. I, Jinwan, really don't lack this 30 million yuan. Jinwan was unconcerned as she said, Every single word you said earlier has already been recorded. Furthermore, it will be automatically transferred from this recording pen to my computer's data backup. As long as the police appear here, I'll hand this over to them. Then, I won't have to worry about anything else. Not only will the money be returned, even your shameful act of interfering in someone else's marriage will be discovered by the police. When that happens, CEO Jean and her husband will most likely not let you off. Supervisor Sue's entire body trembled. She stared at the recording pen in her hand and thought for a moment before saying hoarsely with bloodshot eyes, "If I hand over the money, can you delete this recording and video?" Jean Wan placed her phone and recording pen back in her bag. Her gaze was calm and unperturbed. Low class, greedy, and foolish. Jean Wan's voice was cold. With your intelligence, if you walk on the right path, sooner or later, you will rise to the top. For a man with a family, you destroyed your own future and even broke the law for 30 million yuan. No matter what, you're in charge of finances. You're used to seeing money flowing like water. Could it be that you still don't understand how many people yearn for such ostentatious fame and fortune, and how many people despair? Supervisor Sue bit her lips harshly. She first cried out, then cried until she sat on the ground. Her eyes were filled with fear and wariness as she looked toward Jean Wan. "Where's the money?" Jean Wan asked directly. She did not wish to waste any more time with her. Supervisor Sue hesitated for a moment. Originally, she did not want to hand it over, but she was very mindful as she looked toward Jean Wan's bag. The cell phone and recording pen in that bag could completely destroy her. She slowly took out a financial card with the Philippines logo. "It's here." Jean Wan walked over, received it, and glanced at it. "Ah, you even know to transfer the money to an account in the Philippines. This kind of international money transfer method is indeed very difficult to investigate. Such a meticulous person, TSK. As expected, you're destroying your own future." When Supervisor Sue heard these words, she covered her face in tears. She then stared at Jean Wan's bag with pleading eyes, as though she wanted nothing more than to destroy the recording pen and video. "I won't interfere with your dirty relationship transactions, but regarding the embezzlement of public funds, I will definitely hand it over to the police." Jean Wan moved away from her, saying, "I still need to settle CEO Jin's side. I don't have time to waste with you here. Just wait for the police to come and interrogate you." Jean Wan opened the door and walked out. She had the studio's security guard the door to prevent Supervisor Sue from escaping and causing unnecessary trouble. Chapter 120. When CEO Jean saw that Jean Wan had returned, her smile was filled with mockery. "Miss G's expression seems very relaxed. Could it be that you really managed to conjure up 30 million yuan in these 20 minutes? Jean Wan calmly handed the Philippine International Financial Card to Xiao Ba and softly said, "First, check the amount of money in this card. Ask Supervisor Sue for the password. She's next door." Xiao Ba nodded and quickly walked out with the card. "What's that?" CEO Jean seemed to have noticed something. She stood up and approached, but Xiao Ba had already left with the card without turning back. "CEO Jean, don't be anxious. If you plan on taking away the money you invested back then, of course, I won't forcefully hold it back." Jean Wan calmly glanced at her. CEO Jean glanced at her. "Miss G, don't blame me for being too ruthless. Back then, I only invested some money in a Han Tianyuan's company because of the Han Corporation. Now that the boss has changed and I don't have any relations with your G family, of course, I have to take back the money." "I know." Jean Wan spoke and turned to open the laptop on her desk. She then opened a PowerPoint presentation she had personally prepared. "It's not that I can't satisfy CEO Jin's request to terminate the contract. If you insist on terminating our partnership today, no matter what, I won't forcefully stop you." Jean Wan smiled lightly. "But before you make your final decision, CEO Jean, why don't you take some time to take a look at this?" CEO Jean walked over and glanced at the contents of the laptop disapprovingly. CEO Jean should know of the properties and land resources under construction under our studio's name. For example, this piece of land in the southern part of the city. It's only a street away from the bustling area in the southern part of the city. 2 years ago, the price of this piece of land had already reached a sky-high price. When this area was first built, the pre-sale price had already exceeded 20,000 yuan per square meter. Although this year, the domestic real estate industry has been declining by more than half, and the price here has been dropping by around 5,000 yuan, based on the current construction progress. This area will only be completed by next summer. The prices of the other properties nearby are all lower by half. Furthermore, because the prices have been dropping, the sales of the properties are very good. And so, CEO Jean crossed her arms. Boss Jean, you shouldn't have been a Haicheng local, right? Jean Wan turned to look at her. If you're from High City, you should be well aware of the ratio between the rich and the poor in High City. You should also know that the base number of migrant workers is increasing at an extremely high percentage every year. In High City, the upper class with a net worth of more than 1 billion yuan accounts for 37% of the country's population. All the rich areas in High City are overcrowded. This price of more than 20,000 yuan per square meter is within the acceptable range for most people, but they are currently in a wait-and-see state. Jean Wan turned to the next page of the PowerPoint. As an investor, I can understand that you are not optimistic about the current property industry. However, based on the surrounding environment of the residential area under my studio's name, as well as the analysis of the surrounding per capita income, it is very clear that once the unreasonable talk of a property bubble is gradually forgotten, not to mention this residential area's price of 20,000 yuan per square meter, even if it were to rise to 30,000 yuan per square meter, there would still be a large number of people fighting over it. If we add on the hunger sales model, it is destined that the land and property under my studio's name will have room for growth. It will not end up as you think, losing everything. CEO Jean disapprovingly snorted. I remember that when Han Tianyuan first registered these two companies, he invested a lot of money. Adding on the purchase of land and the construction of properties, he invested quite a bit more. In the end, because the property industry was becoming more and more depressed, he only sold the company to you for 30 million yuan. As she spoke, so Jean narrowed her eyes. The money I invested is already enough to buy your current studio. Yet, you're still speaking to me confidently about how the property prices will continue to soar in the future? Do you think that you're a prophet, that it will definitely rise just because you say so? Han Tianyuan sold the company to me for 30 million yuan because he doesn't know how to do business. Opening two companies and squandering money for fun, it won't be too much of a pity to sell them off. Jean Wan smiled mildly. Right now, if CEO Jean offers 5 times the price to buy my studio, I'm afraid I won't agree. Who doesn't know how to boast? In the future, this will be a losing business. If you want to continue losing money, that's your business. I don't wish to continue participating in this investment. I want to take my money back. Can you stop me? I won't stop you. My words will only go so far. Jean Wan maintained an indifferent expression the entire time. The office door opened, and Xiaoba returned with a card. She handed it to Jean Wan and softly whispered a number into her ear. Jean Wan placed the card on the office table. The money is here. I can also personally cancel the contract with you. Previously, it was merely a member of my finance department who embezzled public funds. We'll settle this sort of internal matter ourselves. The money has already been taken back. Previously, the figures and receipts that the finance department showed you were all fake. CEO Jean still insists on terminating the contract. Is that right? Yes. CEO Jean looked at Jean Wan with disdain. A studio that is destined to lose money is not worth me spending a single cent to play a childish game with you. All right. Jean Wan raised her brows. Then have your lawyer bring the contract termination agreement over. I'll take a look. If there's no problem, we'll directly terminate our partnership. Boss Jean gave the lawyer behind her a look, and the lawyer hurriedly took his briefcase and walked forward quickly. Half an hour later, Jean Wan signed the contract termination agreement. Director Jean held the agreement and the financial card that had already been verified. She smiled smugly and looked around the office. She said sarcastically, "Even if you successfully bring this money back to me, I'm afraid that your liquid funds will be zero right now, right? The buildings under the studio's name have yet to be completed. What are you going to use to continue building? With this lousy place of yours, there won't be any investors who will look favorably upon it. Forget about other things. You won't even be able to afford the advertising fees for future sales." After finishing her words, CEO Jean smiled mockingly and turned to leave. Xiaoba stood behind Jean Wan, angrily glaring at CEO Jin's back. Just as CEO Jean was about to step out of the door, several people dressed neatly in suits suddenly entered the studio. They did not look simple at all. "May I ask, which one of you is CEO G?" The young man dressed in a black suit at the very front asked politely the moment he entered. Jean Wan glanced at them, hiding the trace of doubt in her eyes. She answered, "I am." CEO Jean was originally about to leave. When she saw this scene, she curiously turned back to watch this scene. "Hello, CEO G. We are the representatives of the MO Corporation's CE International Investment Agency. We represent the MO Corporation to sign a contract with your studio." Hearing these words, everyone in the office was instantly stunned. Jean Wan blinked. "Sign a contract?" "That's right. The MO Corporation will invest $200 million in your studio." Xiao Ba and the people in the office were instantly shocked to the point their jaws dropped. $200 million? CEO Jean, who had yet to leave, was also stunned. Her eyes were filled with shock. Chapter 121. Heavens, heavens, heavens! As expected of Boss Wan's husband, what a timely reign! Xiao Ba stood behind Jean Wan, filled with excitement. $200 million? Are you sure you're not joking? CEO Jin's expression was confused. Her eyes were filled with disdain. Could it be that Miss G was afraid of losing face and hired 2 extras to support you? This time, Xiao Ba glared at CEO Jean confidently. Some people shouldn't look down on others, all right? It seems like CEO Jean is indeed not a Haicheng local. You don't even know that our CEO G is the wife of the MO Corporation CEO. CEO Jean immediately stared at Jean Wan in astonishment before shifting her gaze to Xiao Ba. She then stared at the 2 representatives from the CE investment agency, who clearly did not look like fake actors. Although CEO Jin's family's company was in Haicheng, she was often abroad. Each time she returned, she would only stay for a few days before leaving. The company was managed by her husband. She only knew of Haicheng's 4 prominent families, and that this Jean Wan was the G family's daughter. Right now, the G family was no longer as stable as they were a few years ago in the upper class. A mere identity as the G family's daughter did not have much of an impact. But MO Corporation, of course she had heard of it. CEO Jean paused for a moment before shifting her gaze to the 2 CE investment agency investors. "Are you for real?" The 2 did not even glance at her. They continued to politely face Jean Wan. "CEO G, please forgive us for coming uninvited. The investment contract has already been drafted before we came. Please take a look." They handed the contract over. Jean Wan hesitated for a moment before accepting it. She was actually quite shocked. This CE investment agency was the largest investment company in Haicheng in the past 10 years. It had many well-known cooperation cases with many of the world's top 100 companies. Right now, CE Investment Agency was already under the MO Corporation's name. Jean Wan's original plan was to sell the 2 or 3 properties and idle cars under her name for tens of millions of yuan so that she could continue to build those properties. She still had the inheritance her mother left her before she passed away. Although it was not much, it was enough for her to temporarily solve the current situation. After all, the money could be earned back in the future, so she had been steady and orderly. She only dealt with the personnel changes in the studio and was not very anxious about the money. She didn't expect that Mo Jingxin had already known her financial situation like the back of his hand. Not only did he send the most authoritative investment agency to sign a contract with her, but the contract even clearly indicated the budget of the land and real estate projects under her studio's name, which not only saved her a lot of trouble, but also directly pointed out a clear path for her. "Is this arranged by your CEO, Mo?" Jean Wan looked up after reading it. The tall man, who was one of the representatives, nodded and smiled at her modestly. "We know CEO G's concerns. In fact, you can think of it this way. What our investment organization values is the market prospects and the profits we can reap in the future. Even if CEO G has no relationship with MO Corporation, we will screen and plan the nearby real estate companies and find the most suitable company to invest a sum of money in. MO Jingshin really understood her well. These two people's words were really watertight and logical. They managed to expose MO Jingshin's true relationship with her, and at the same time, they managed to save her face. I'll have to trouble the two of you to wait in the VIP lounge. Jinwon was silent for a moment before nodding at them. She then turned to look at CEO Jean, who was still standing by the door. CEO Jean, is there anything else? From afar, CEO Jean had seen the logo on the contract in Jinwon's hands. It was indeed the anti-counterfeiting logo of the CE investment agency. The people from CE personally came to sign the contract and directly showed them the anti-counterfeiting logo. From this, it could be seen how much importance they placed on this studio. In an instant, CEO Jean felt that the card in her hand that she had just asked for back was burning hot. She changed her mocking expression and said with an awkward smile, "Miss G, I haven't looked through the PowerPoint you showed me earlier. Actually, it's not that we can't continue working together, but I'm not too confident in the domestic real estate market. Why don't we find some time to specifically talk about this?" Jinwon glanced at her. "Earlier, I've already asked CEO Jean to reconsider. I've asked you again and again if you're sure you want to terminate the contract." CEO Jean felt as though her face had been slapped loudly. However, if Jinwon truly had the backing of the MO Corporation, then this so-called studio would definitely not close down. Furthermore, the MO Corporation also had the illustrious Hai Chung MO family behind it. That was the MO family. Earlier I was indeed in the wrong. My emotions were a little extreme, and I said a few angry words in a moment of hot-headedness. Actually, I've thought about it carefully. The real estate market is indeed what everyone needs the most. Although we've just signed a contract, we're terminating the previous investment contract with CEO Han. I think it's a good time to re-sign the contract with a new Immerse studio. Jinwon smiled lightly at her, but her voice was directed at Xiao Ba, who had a disgusted expression. "Xiao Ba, send the guest out." When Xiao Ba heard this, she instantly felt extremely satisfied. She nodded her head forcefully. "All right." As she spoke, she walked forward and smiled at CEO Jean, who was gradually losing her composure. She extended her hand toward the slightly opened office door and gestured for her to enter. "CEO Jean, take care." CEO Jean also wanted her face. However, the moment she thought that she might have offended Jinwon, as well as the MO family or MO Corporation, her heart trembled. Although she came here today to retrieve the 30 million yuan, she had unknowingly brought trouble to her own company. She then saw that Jinwon clearly did not intend to continue talking to her. Her attitude remained calm and indifferent, causing her to be unable to understand what was going on. She instantly felt anxious in her heart. "Miss G, regarding the cooperation, we can really discuss it again. If you have any dissatisfaction toward me, I can get my husband to personally re-sign the contract with you." CEO Jean decided to lower her stance and look toward Jinwon with a face full of smiles. Jinwon chuckled lightly. Her tone was unhurried and meaningful. "Right now, I'm afraid your husband won't have the time to care about such matters." CEO Jin's expression was surprised. It was clear that she did not understand the hidden meaning behind her words. However, the hint of mockery and meaning still caused CEO Jean to instinctively furrow her brows. Not wanting to waste any more time, Jinwon gave Xiao Ba another look. Xiao Ba directly went to open the office door. She then turned to look at the conflicted CEO Jean. "CEO Jean, please." The intention to chase her away was extremely obvious. No matter how thick-skinned she was, she could tell that right now, Jinwon was not going to give her any chance to continue talking about the cooperation. Chapter 122. Serve her right. Who asked her to look down on us? No wonder she dared to bring her lawyer over to forcefully terminate the contract. It turns out that she didn't even investigate our studio's background and dared to bully us. Xiaoba spat at the door. She turned back to see Jinwon standing there with a pensive expression. "Boss Nguyen, Are we really going to receive a 200 million US dollar investment? Xiao Ba's eyes were filled with anticipation. She jogged back as though she wanted to hug her thigh, moving closer to Jin Wan's side. Jin Wan was silent for a moment before saying, "Go call the police and have them bring Supervisor Su away. She's suspected of embezzlement and other business crimes. We need to investigate them carefully. Hand her over to the police station first." Xiao Ba was shocked. She then asked in a voice that only Jin Wan could hear, "A few days ago, you asked me to investigate Supervisor Su's personal situation. Did you already suspect her?" Jin Wan glanced at her indifferently. "With your reaction speed, you probably won't even understand what's going on when the company is sold. Why are you trying to act smart with me now? I'm asking you to call the police, so hurry up and do it." "Oh." Xiaoba looked at her with a wronged expression. Her hands moved quickly as she picked up her phone and called the nearby police station. 2 hours later, because she had signed a contract worth 200 million US dollars with CE International Investment Agency, this small studio under Jin Wan's name, which was originally unknown, had become the small studio with the highest amount of funding in Haicheng. In this hour, the phone on Jin Wan's desk was about to explode from the calls. Most of them were from previous investors who suddenly called to show concern about the studio situation. They even said they wanted to arrange a time to meet with Jin Wan to discuss the investment. Some even expressed their sincerity through the phone, saying that they had always felt that Han Tianyuan was unreliable. After Jin Wan took over, they had always looked forward to working with Jin Wan, and so on. After receiving too many calls, Jin Wan finally had a moment of peace. She was about to pour herself a glass of water when all of a sudden, the phone in her pocket vibrated. She picked it up and saw that it was Mo Jingshin. Earlier, Jin Wan was afraid that he was busy and did not look for him. Now, he actually took the initiative to call her. She returned to her desk and sat down. She picked up the phone and said, "Why didn't you tell me in advance that you suddenly sent 2 people from CE Investment to sign a contract with me? You threw money at me without saying a word. You scare me to death. Okay? Why are you so timid? It's just an investment cooperation." The man's voice came from the other end of the phone. His voice was deep and sexy. Jin Wan couldn't help complaining to him about the bunch of phone calls she had just received, as well as the disgusting faces of those people. Then she said, "The key is that those who originally intended to withdraw their investment are now fighting to continue to invest. I'm just a studio. If this continues, the amount of financing will be enough for me to set up a shareholding company." Mo Jingshin smiled mildly. "Mrs. Mo is ambitious and has a bright future. I have to help you." "Boss Missouri, this isn't just a helping hand." Since the contract had been signed, Jin Wan was not in the mood to be delicate. She said bluntly, I suddenly feel a little pressured. Pressured is a good thing. This proves that Mrs. Mo hasn't lost her direction," Mo Jingshan said calmly. Mo Jingshan spoke calmly. "You know very well that I sent CE's people over and did not go personally. There was also a contract signed in the middle. You should know that this investment wasn't placed in your hands for nothing." "Of course I know." Jin Wan held her chin, leaning against the table. She pressed the phone to her ear, her voice clear and gentle. "So, although it seems like I've received such a high investment, in reality, I'm actually in debt of 200 million US dollars. Furthermore, the contract that CE people gave me also included a guarantee. Within 5 years, my profits will be doubled. Otherwise, I can withdraw my investment at any time." Mo Jingshin calmly said, "It's good that you know." Jin Wan held her forehead. The people in the studio were currently celebrating the generous investment they had just received. Only she was clear that she had a huge debt on her, and the creditor was her husband. The methods that Mo Jingshin had used today, without batting an eyelid, every step that he had taken was impossible for her to reject. Business was official, and the contract was signed by CE's people. None of this was child's play. Thus, Mo Jingshin still respected her initial wishes and did not interfere. This investment, he really did not give it for nothing. Hearing the little woman lying on the table and sighing, Mo Jingshin softly chuckled. "Previously, weren't you very confident in the future property industry in the country? I still have confidence. But suddenly, the pressure is huge. This isn't a small case like tens of millions. It's only doubled in 5 years. Why? You don't dare to accept it? I've already signed it. Of course I dare, Mo Jingshin chuckled lightly. All right, go home early. I'll pick you up at the U Garden before 6. After work, Jinwan drove back to the U Garden as promised. After alighting from the car, she was still thinking about the studio. She walked into the U Garden, opened the door to the villa, and closed the door without turning back. She threw her bag on the table, changed her shoes, and entered the living room on the first floor. She took off her coat. The U Garden was huge. Not mentioning the floors above, just the living room on the first floor was over 200 square meters. Including the kitchen, dining room, and guest rooms, the total area was over 400 square meters. And at this moment, this place, to Jinwan, was suddenly too spacious and quiet. At this time, the usually warm and considerate Annie Chen actually did not come out to welcome her. The servants who usually walked around on the first floor were also not around. Perhaps using the word spacious was not appropriate, but it was unusually quiet. Jinwan casually raised her eyes, scanning the living room in front of her. She felt that something was wrong. Earlier, when she entered the door, she had already sensed that something was amiss. Earlier on, when she drove back, not far from the U Garden, there seemed to be a black Jeep parked there. The model of the car had never appeared in this area before, and the license plate was something she had never seen before. It was just that she did not pay too much attention to it. Now that she thought of it, she abruptly raised her eyes to look at her surroundings. She instinctively took a step back until she vaguely sensed danger approaching. She bent down to pick up her bag from the ground. Without even changing her shoes, she decisively turned to run out. And at this moment, 2 unfamiliar men hiding in the corner of the first floor suddenly rushed out at a rapid speed. They were like ferocious beasts waiting for an opportunity to hunt in the bushes. When the time was ripe, they began to bare their fangs. Just as Jinwan was about to open the door and shout for help, they dragged her back in. Mo Jingshin told her not to wander around these days, and to go home early was more or less reminded her that she would be in danger. Recalling the scene when she was locked in the bathroom that day, Jinwan could roughly sense that Mo Jingshin's father, Mo Xiaoza, was a person who would not rest until he achieved his goals. As long as he wanted to do something, even if it meant offending Mo Jingshin, even if his methods were ruthless and unacceptable, he would not hesitate to do it. Just now, when the 2 men restrained her, they had warned her, but apart from taking her away, they did not seem to have any intention of harming her. Jinwan was most likely Mo Xiaoza. Jinwan's originally panicked heart gradually calmed down. No matter what Mo Xiaoza was planning to do, it would definitely not endanger her life. The Mo family and the Ji family were both prominent families in Haicheng. With Mo Jingshin in the mix, Mo Xiaoza would not dare to kill anyone. As the car drove, the surroundings were dark. It was impossible to tell how much time had passed. Every minute and second felt like an entire year. Jinwan closed her eyes in dizziness because of the increasingly scarce air behind the car. Regardless of Mo Xiaoza's motive, she had to conserve her energy first before she could face him with a clear mind. After an unknown amount of time, she finally heard the car door open. Jinwan opened her eyes. She squinted because of the strong light outside the car, but before she could clearly see the appearance of the 2, she was abruptly dragged out by them. They still pressed her down and covered her mouth. However, this time, Jinwan's resistance was much weaker. She only made 2 woo-woo sounds before she was brought in. The 2 nimbly pushed her into a room. Jinwan stumbled and fell to the floor inside. Her arms hurt when they hit the ground. She forced herself to sit up and looked up at the door that was quickly closed. Miss G, please stay here for a night. Tomorrow morning, we'll send you back. The voices of the 2 came from outside the door, followed by the sound of their footsteps leaving. Jinwan rushed to the door, but it was already locked from the inside. The door in front of her was made of high-grade oak wood. It was very sturdy. If it was locked from the inside, it would be impossible to break it open without hard tools. Jean Wan's hand paused on the door. She abruptly turned back to look at the dark room. Although she could not see clearly, she felt that the floor she fell on was of good quality. This place did not seem like a place that kidnappers would use because it was very high grade. She tentatively raised her hand and felt around the wall by the door. When she found the light switch, she pressed it with a paw sound. The light in the room suddenly turned on. Although it was not a glaring light, it was a soft light that allowed one to see everything clearly. What entered her eyes was a very luxurious guest room. It had all the daily necessities, including a bathroom. There was a large bed in the center of the room. Although it looked elegant and exquisite from the furnishings, it was indeed a guest room. Directly opposite, there was a window behind the curtains. Jean Wan quickly walked over and pulled open the curtains. The sky outside was already dark. She estimated that it was at least 7 or 8 in the evening. The window was not a floor-to-ceiling window, but an ordinary square window. This was the 3rd floor of an unknown villa. It was not particularly tall, but the window was explosion-proof and could not be broken. The only small window that could be opened was also locked. She had thought that the mastermind behind the kidnappers had made a mistake and thought that they could escape through the window. The glimmer of hope that had just been ignited was once again shattered. Jean Wan stood by the window and looked out. She saw the large swimming pool behind the villa and the surrounding flower beds full of life. Was there someone living here now? This window faced the back of the villa. There was no road behind, nor were there any people or cars passing by. Even if the lights were on in the room, no one would be able to see her if she stood by the window and made a gesture of knocking on the window for help. There was no way to escape. Jean Wan paced back and forth in the room. Chapter 124. Jean Wan hugged her legs as she sat by the window, staring at the sky outside. Being locked up here, time seemed to have stopped. It was only when she vaguely heard the sound of a car approaching that she abruptly stood up. She turned and rushed to the door, pressing her ear against it. This was the 3rd floor. She could not hear the movements on the 1st floor clearly, but she did hear a loud knock on the door. Then, there were footsteps approaching from the 1st floor. Jean Wan raised her hand and tried to knock on the door twice, wanting to remind the person rushing over that she was locked up here. You still have the strength to knock on the door. Did you think the person who came was Jing Shun? All of a sudden, a voice that was slightly unfamiliar to Jean Wan came from outside. That voice carried the experience and low voice of a middle-aged man. His tone was cold and even a little disdainful. Jean Wan's hand immediately froze on the door. Miss G, I'm Mo Jingshan's father. Today, I invited you here to stay for a night. I have no intention of harming you. After tomorrow, you'll be free. In Mo Xiao's words, the so-called freedom, Jean Wan could clearly hear another layer of meaning. She was silent for a moment before raising her voice to say, Since you're Jingshan's father, I should call you Dad in name. We're family. Why did you lock me up? This Dad. I can't accept it. Mo Xiao coldly said. Jingshan has more important things to do tonight. He doesn't have time to deal with your problem. You can stay here in peace. Where's Mo Jingshan right now? Jean Wan instinctively had a bad premonition. From today onwards, his whereabouts have nothing to do with you. You can only stay here today. Don't run out and ruin his plans. After coldly saying this, Mo Xiao directly left the door. He did not plan on saying another word to her. At the same time, there was the sound of a car approaching. Jean Wan suppressed the layers of uneasiness in her heart and leaned against the door to listen carefully. Not long after, she heard what sounded like the sound of a walking stick hitting the ground. Following that, Elder Mo's angry roar rang from the staircase. You locked that G-brat here, didn't you? Let her out right now. It was Grandfather Mo. Jean Wan frantically knocked on the door. Grandfather, I'm here. Grandpa. There was a short silence outside. She was on this floor, so Grandfather Mo might not be able to hear her. Outside, Elder Mo raised his voice and scolded. Xiao Zhe, no matter how much power you have in America, don't forget that Hai Cheng still has me in Jingshun. If I want you to leave Shine, all I need to do is say the word. You don't even listen to your own father now, do you? Elder Mo angrily roared. He had rushed here in a hurry, and his words were rough. Jinwan and Jingshun's relationship is very good. If you dare to force this loving couple to live the rest of their lives in torment, don't even think about entering the Mo family's doors in this lifetime. I don't recognize you as my cruel and merciless son. Father, please calm down. Mo Xiao Zhe had already descended. His tone was neither fast nor slow. It's already this late. The setup that should be set has already been set. The people who should be involved have already entered. Even if you fly over now, it'll be useless. Jingshan can't stay in the country forever. Many years ago, he had his own achievements in America. In the future, when he inherits Shine, he will stay in America for a long time. In this huge Haicheng, a mere daughter of the Ji family is completely unsuitable for him. Whether he's suitable or not is Jingshan's own choice. Did you really think that back then, Jingshan and Jinwan's marriage was completely arranged by me? If Jingshun hadn't agreed to it himself, even if I held a knife to his neck, he wouldn't have married her. Elder Mo said harshly. So what? Back then, when Jingshun left America, I already warned him. If he wasn't so hard to control, I wouldn't have used such a method. He belongs to Shine. He can't be limited to this Haicheng forever. If he wants to leave, he has to break away from Jinwan, an unimportant shackle. Mo Xiao Zhe's reply was cold and arrogant, leaving no room for negotiation. T. You kidnapped Jinwan, drugged your own son, and locked him in a hotel room within Shuyan. Did you learn such despicable methods from those Americans? Hearing these words, Jinwan, who had been quietly standing by the door, felt as though she had fallen into an icy lake. Her blood from head to toe lost all warmth. Since I've sent Shu Yin to Haicheng, I don't plan on sending her back to the family in America. She must marry Jingshun. Mo Xiao Zhe's tone was cold and arrogant. You're already old. There's no need to worry about the marriage of the younger generation. As long as we successfully get through tonight, perhaps Shu Yan's stomach will have the great-grandson you've longed for day and night. Pa, are you trying to force Jingshun to his death? Or are you trying to force me my death? Mo Xiao Zhe was cold and indifferent. Father, you came here. Even if you can bring Jinwan away, what can you do? Before I came back, Jingshun and Shu Yin had already been together in the room for more than half an hour. Right now, even more time has passed. That kind of drug, not to mention Jingshun's hot-blooded age, even someone like you in your 70s or 80s would not be able to withstand it. You bastard. Elder Mo abruptly raised his walking stick and viciously struck Mo Xiao Zhe. How could I have a son like you? Immediately call the people over there to release Jingshun and Shu Yin. I can't watch as Jingshun is destroyed by you. It's too late. The drug takes effect quickly. No man can withstand it. If you open the door now, you'll undoubtedly be interrupting Jingshun's good time. You unfilial son. I really regret not strangling you to death in your swaddling clothes 50 years ago. Mo Xiao Zhe sneered disapprovingly. If I die, where will you find such a good grandson in the future? Elder Mo angrily swatted him away with his walking stick and rushed upstairs. Where did you lock Jinwan up? Mo Xiao Zhe saw that the elder had already gone up to the third floor. It was clear that he had heard Jinwan's incessant knocking on the door. His eyes were cold and displeased. However, because the elder had already found his way over, he coldly followed up. Jinwan was behind the door. Her lips had already been bitten until they bled. She forcefully knocked on the door. Grandfather, I'm here. The sound of the walking stick and hurried footsteps approached at the same time. Elder Mo stepped forward and used his walking stick to hit the door harshly. He flew into a rage and turned back to glare at Mo Xiao Zhe. If you don't release Jinwan today, if you dare to let anything happen to either Jingshun or Jinwan, this old man will directly die in front of you. Father. Mo Xiao Zhe's expression was cold. Chapter 125. If this old man can't save my grandson and granddaughter-in-law today, I'll drag you, my own son, down with me. Elder Mo's anger shook the heavens as he turned and charged toward the staircase. Emo Xiaoza saw that he was serious and immediately furrowed his brows. Jin Wan can be released, but even if you bring her to look for Jingshin now, the result will be the same. Why do you have to do this? F***CK, your mother's bullshit. Jingshin definitely won't touch the family's girl. Elder Emo harshly said, "Are you going to release her or not? Do you want me to place righteousness before family and beat you, this unfilial son, to death? Will you only let this matter rest after the Mo family is destroyed?" Emo Xiaoza was silent for a moment before abruptly shifting his gaze toward the bodyguard at the staircase. The bodyguard nodded and took the key to open the door to Jin Wan's room. The crisp sound of the door being unlocked rang. In the next moment, Jin Wan forcefully twisted the door open and rushed out. She immediately saw Emo Xiaoza standing in the corridor with an ugly expression. Her entire face was slightly pale as she turned to look at Elder Emo. "Brat, are you hurt anywhere? Quickly tell grandfather." Elder Emo walked over shakily with the support of his walking stick. His eyes were filled with heartache. Jin Wan's lips were stained with blood from her own biting. She silently stared at the elder for a long time. After confirming that the elder's expression of anger and heartache was real and that he was not joking, she suppressed the surging emotions in her heart and tried to ask calmly, "Grandfather, what you said earlier, is it true?" Knowing that she had heard it, Elder Emo closed his eyes. It was clear that he did not want her to feel too uncomfortable. He softly comforted her. "Don't worry. I believe in Jing Shun. He will definitely be able to endure it." Emo Xiaoza's gaze was dark and cold. "Father, you've already seen her. Can you be at ease now?" Elder Emo turned back to scold him. Emo Xiaoza had already called for the bodyguard. "Send the elder back to the Emo residence." "You're only letting me go back?" "No, Jinwan has to leave with me." Elder Emo held onto his walking stick with one hand and quickly reached out with the other. He grabbed Jinwan's wrist and pulled her behind him. His aged and slightly hunched body shielded Jinwan behind him. Jinwan looked at the elder in front of her, but could not say a word. Her eyes were cold as she stared at the expressionless Emo Xiaoza. Emo Xiaoza ignored Jinwan's gaze and said coldly, "I'll let you see her to prove that she is indeed unharmed here, but before tomorrow morning, she can't leave this place. She must stay under my watch. I can't give her a chance to ruin Jing Shun and Shu Yan's good time." Jin Wan's breathing was already trembling. She abruptly opened her mouth. "You're using such a method to force him. Have you considered the consequences you'll face tomorrow?" Emo Xiaoza laughed coldly. "Consequences? Of course. The result will be you signing the divorce papers. Do you think that after tonight, Jing Shun will still be yours?" In both her lives, Jin Wan had never been so angered that her entire body was trembling. If the person in front of her was not Emo Jingshin's father, she would definitely take a knife and chop him. Sensing her agitated emotions, Elder Emo pressed down on her hand. "Brat, go back with grandfather first. She can't leave." Emo Xiaoza's eyes were filled with displeasure. "She must leave with me." Elder Emo grabbed onto Jin Wan's wrist, unwilling to leave her here. "She's Jing Shun's person. Even if Jing Shun isn't here, on account that Jin Wan calls me grandfather, I'll bring her safely back to the Emo family. Shu Yan can also call you grandfather." Emo Xiaoza's expression was cold. After tonight, Jing Shun will know that the most suitable person for him is still in Shu Yan. Elder Mo's expression was cold. He still held onto Ji Wan's wrist tightly, blocking her behind him. Every time the two bodyguards tried to approach, the elder would raise his walking stick and force them away. Elder Emo angrily shouted, "Who dares to touch my granddaughter-in-law? Step over this old man's body first." "Father." Emo Xiaoza's expression was dark. His voice was filled with warning and dissatisfaction. "At your age, you shouldn't meddle in the matters of the younger generation." Elder Emo refused to move aside. Even though he was old, his gaze was still bright. It was not much different from his 50-year-old son. Emo Xiaoza watched this scene. After a moment, he furrowed his brows and impatiently waved his hand. All right. Let them go. Send the elder back to the MO residence. Elder Mo's expression did not soften. He directly brought Jinwan, whose face was pale from anger, down the stairs. It's fine to bring Jinwan back to the MO residence. Tomorrow morning, I'll have Jingshun and Shuyin go back to see you and sign the divorce papers with her. Mo Shaoza stood at the foot of the stairs, speaking heavily. Elder Mo coldly harumphed and did not pay him any heed. Finally, Jinwan was brought into the car. Elder Mo sat in the front, his expression heavy as he called for the chauffeur to drive. He then turned back to comfort her. Child, don't worry. I believe in Jingshun. With his willpower, he will definitely be able to overcome everything that happened tonight. He loves you and will protect your marriage. Other than you, he won't touch any other woman. Trust grandfather. Jinwan had suppressed her emotions for a long time. She tried her best to maintain her composure in front of the elder so that he would not worry too much. She softly asked, So, is he really locked up with Shuyin? Elder Mo sighed softly. I know very well what kind of person Jingshin's father is. Today, he ordered people to forcefully lock you up here. The matter on Jingshin's side is most likely true. If I hadn't heard the news from Xiao Zhe's men, I wouldn't have been able to rush over to bring you away. Since you were able to find me, does that mean you know where Jingshun is? Jinwan furrowed her brows. Elder Mo shook his head. Before I rushed over, I had already sent people out to investigate. However, Haicheng is so big. There are tens of thousands of four-star hotels and above. Right now, the only thing grandfather can do is to rescue you. Right now, I can't find Jingshun, but you are Jingshun's flesh and blood. I can't allow you to be harmed. Stop the car. Jinwan suddenly said, Grandfather, let me get off. Elder Mo was silent for a moment. It was not that he did not know her personality. After all, this was Jinwan and Mo Jingshin's marriage. She had things she wanted to say and do. He should not stop her. The car had just stopped when Jinwan abruptly pushed open the door and got off. She turned and ran back to the villa. Before the door closed, she rushed in. Mo Shaoza heard the movements outside the door and turned back to look at Jinwan, who had actually returned. His cold gaze was calm as he looked at her. You've already been brought away by the elder. Why did you come back? Mo Shaoza coldly asked. Chapter 126. Mo Shaoza smiled coldly. You dare to threaten me? Your guts aren't small. Don't think that Jingshun can protect you forever. Right now, he's already together with Shuyin. I advise you to hurry up and prepare for a divorce. Although human nature has a side that is hard to control, even if it's controlled by the drug. Jinwan's gaze was firm. But I still believe in him. After speaking, without waiting for the two bodyguards to chase her out, Jinwan directly turned and walked out. Returning to Grandfather Mo's car, she asked in a calm voice, Grandfather, can you lend me your phone? Elder Mo did not say much, directly passing the phone to her. Jinwan picked it up and was about to call Mo Jingshin when she saw that there was an entire row of call records. There were more than 30 of Mo Jingshin's numbers. They were all numbers that Elder Mo had previously called him. There were so many of them, but not a single one was connected. Jinwan calmly dialed Mo Jingshin's number and then placed the phone by her ear. After a short beep, there was a cold and emotionless female voice. I'm sorry. The number you have dialed is temporarily unavailable. Sorry, Mo home. On the way back, it had already begun to rain. Right now, the rain was pouring outside. Jinwan sat on the bed. The pillow in her arms had already changed shape due to the strength she had used to hug it. The last time she stayed here was on Grandfather Mo's birthday. That night, Mo Jingshan said, Relax and be Mrs. Mo. You have me for everything. When she returned once again, sitting on this bed, all she could hear was the howling wind and heavy rain outside. She had called Mo Jingshan countless times, but none of them were able to connect. Elder Mo had sent out several batches of people, but they could not find any trace of him. Even the last location of Mo Jingshan's phone signal was checked, but there was no result. Time passed bit by bit. It was already 11 o'clock p.m. According to Mo Shaoza, Mo Jingshan had been locked up within Shuyin since 7 o'clock p.m. An entire 4 hours had passed. There was a knock on the door. Jinwan sat on the bed and did not move. Finally, a helper pushed the door open. After taking a look, she turned and nodded at Elder Mo. Elder Mo's figure appeared by the door and walked in. Brat, since you said you believe in Jing Shun, you should wait for him to come back in peace. Elder Mo looked at her, gently comforting her. I watched Jing Shun grow up. I know very well what kind of person he is, how his character is, and how his self-control is. Jinwan nodded silently and did not speak. She knew how it felt to be drugged. After all, she had experienced it before. How she had suffered that night, and how her body reacted naturally. Those scenes and feelings were magnified infinitely in her mind and body. It had been 4 hours. If it was her, if she was locked in the same room with a man for 4 hours that night, she would definitely have a mental breakdown. If she really couldn't control herself in the end, she might hit her head on the wall and would rather die. What about Mo Jingxin? What would happen to him now? It was said that the drug would completely destroy a man's rationality, and he would only be able to rely on his biological instincts. Rumble. The deafening thunder sounded again, and a bolt of lightning flashed across the dark night sky. The dazzling light illuminated the front yard of the Mo mansion, but it was instantly drowned in the endless darkness. Chapter 127. At this time, why would there be a car coming? Elder Mo's eyes were suddenly filled with hope. He turned back and urged, "Quickly go take a look. Has Jingxin returned?" The moment the elder spoke, Jinwan was already one step ahead of everyone else and ran out first. Brat, why didn't you bring an umbrella? Quickly hold an umbrella for her. Don't get wet. Elder Mo chased after her with his walking stick, but he could not catch up to Jinwan's speed. He watched as Jinwan ignored the pouring rain and rushed out the door. The helper and butler rushed out with umbrellas. Jinwan did not notice how cold and wet she was. She only stared at the car lights and ran over. However, when she approached, she realized that the car was not Mo Jingxin's, but a taxi. Her footsteps paused. She stood in the rain. The night lights on both sides of the Mo family's courtyard swayed slightly under the rain. The car door opened. The moment she saw Shuyan's figure standing by the car, Jinwan's brows instantly froze, and Shuyan came over with an umbrella after alighting. She raised her eyes to see Jinwan, and her footsteps paused. She then turned to see the helper and butler come over to hold the umbrella over Jinwan's head. However, at this time, Jinwan's entire body was already drenched, and Shuyan approached Jinwan. Through the curtain of rain, she softly said, "Mrs. Mo, I'm very sorry." Jinwan stood there, watching Shuyan, who came alone. From start to finish, she did not see Mo Jingxin's figure. Her expression was calm, but it was as though she was silently suppressing her emotions. Her gaze was cold, and her tone was low and slow. "What did you do? Are you going to apologize to me?" And Shuyan lowered her eyes, holding onto the umbrella. "The rain is so heavy. Let's go in and talk." "That's right, madam. Your hands are all wet. Quickly go back and change." The helper held the umbrella for Jinwan while reaching out to pull her back. Jinwan silently stared at Shuyan. She saw a flash of emotion in Shuyan's eyes and immediately seemed to understand something. She did not speak further and allowed the helpers to drag her back into the villa. The old man had just taken a few steps behind them with an umbrella. Seeing that they were about to enter, he hurriedly asked the servant to open both doors of the villa and let them in quickly. The helper deftly brought 2 thick blankets over to cover Jinwan, and Shuyan had been holding the umbrella and was not drenched. She placed the umbrella down the moment she entered. "Shuyan, how could it be you? This is what's going on with you guys today." Elder Mo saw that Shuyan was dressed neatly and was not locked in a room like Mo Shaoza had said. "Grandpa Mo, I'm sorry. I should have come earlier, but because there were spies around, I couldn't avoid them. That's why I came so late." And Shuyan said to Elder Mo apologetically, "I can explain tonight's situation to you, but can I speak to Mrs. Mo alone for a few words first?" Elder Mo furrowed his brows. turning to look at Jin-Wan, whose head and face were drenched in rain. Jin-Wan calmly looked at Shuyan, her voice cold. "What do you want to say?" And Shuyan directly walked toward her, using her gaze to indicate for Jin-Wan to go to the side to speak. Jin-Wan did not speak, turning to walk to the first floor of the villa near the blue and white porcelain vase. And Shuyan stood by her side. When she spoke, her voice was so soft that only Jin-Wan could hear. "To be honest, to me, tonight is indeed a rare opportunity. I've liked CEO Mo for many years. Ever since I was a teenager, my father and Uncle Mo promised me that they would definitely let me marry him. Because the autumn rain was too cold, Jin-Wan's face and lips were pale from the cold. However, her gaze was cold and bright. So, for missing to come here at this time, it shouldn't be as simple as expressing your stance." And Shuyan smiled mildly, but her smile was somewhat bitter. "The reason I like CEO Mo is because I really like him too much, and I look up to this man too much. That's why I can't use such a method to forcefully keep him." Jin-Wan silently raised her brows. Liking was possessive, while love was not easily profane. It was as though it was only at this moment that Jin-Wan truly felt in Shuyan's seriousness toward Mo Jingshin. And Shuyan's tone was mild and unhurried. "I've always known about today's plan. Although Uncle Mo's methods were a little overboard, I initially tacitly agreed and accepted it. However, at the most crucial moment, I gave up. In order to avoid Uncle Mo's spies, I gave the cup of coffee that they gave me to another female secretary who was traveling with me. The coffee contained something similar to a knockout drug, something that would cause a person to faint for more than 10 hours. After she fainted, I exchanged clothes with her. The people Uncle Mo sent were not particularly familiar with me, so they directly brought the unconscious female secretary away and sent her to the designated room." Jin-Wan glanced at her. "Since you agreed to this plan from the start, why did you still drug yourself?" And Shuyan chuckled lightly. "It should be easy for you to figure out the reason." Jin-Wan coldly smiled. Indeed, and Shuyan was a shrewd woman. If she wanted to use this opportunity to be together with Mo Jingshin, she would definitely leave a way out for herself. If she was also drugged, she could logically become the innocent party. "Actually, if it was a fair competition, I might not lose to you. Even if I lose because of CEO Mo's feelings for you, and not because of you, Jin-Wan," and Shuyan softly emphasized. Jin-Wan indifferently curved her lips. "Missin, from the moment you agreed to cooperate with this plan, you had already lost." And Shuyan's expression faltered. The trace of distress in her eyes did not escape Jin-Wan's eyes. As long as you had the slightest chance of winning, you would never agree to such a lowly and despicable plan. The coldness in Jin-Wan's eyes surged. In the end, what woke you up was not because of how much you love Mo Jingshin, but because you understand him too well. You knew that such an outcome would not only fail to obtain him, but it would also bring about unimaginable consequences. And Shuyan smiled. "Mrs. Mo, you really aren't like the rumors. Perhaps I've really underestimated you. I don't need your overestimation." Jin-Wan dragged out her words. "Right now, it is Miss Anne's sobriety that has truly saved your life. You know very well that Mo Jingshin is not someone who can be easily manipulated or threatened by others. This step of yours is to protect yourself." And Shuyan suddenly stared at her, speaking in a low voice. "Right now, your words are so rude. Aren't you afraid that I'll just walk away right now and continue hiding CEO Mo's whereabouts?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.